start. Please take your seats. Excuse me, please take your seats. Thank you. Good morning. This is the Board of Standards and Appeals public hearing for April 8th, 2014. We'll begin with the special order calendar, decision items. Item number 1, 11668BZ and 96067BZ, 36 and 40 Central Park South, Manhattan.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Farhadian, and I'm an associate at Ackerman LLP, appearing this morning on behalf of 36 and 40 Central Park South.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Collins. Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 2, 54682BZ, 148-15 89th Avenue, Queens.
Hi again. My name is Sarah Farhadian. I'm an associate at Ackerman LLP, appearing this morning on behalf of 148-15 89th Avenue, Queens.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Collins. Shouldn't call him. Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Thanks.
Item number 3, 24601BZ, 3511 Prince Street, Queens, the office of Eric Palatnik.
Hello, good morning, Eric Palatnik.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Collins. Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 4, calendar number 36905BZ, 908 Clove Road, Staten Island, Eric Palatnik.
Good morning again, Eric Palatnik.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Thank you.
Continued hearings. Item number 5, calendar number 82319BZ, 1901 10th Avenue, Brooklyn, Eric Palatnik.
Good morning again, Eric Palatnik.
All right, you heard our comments yesterday.
Yes, we'd be fine with that.
Right, because as it's shown right now, it doesn't seem to have the proper aisle width. So why don't you work with our examiner and put appropriate notes, remove the parking layout, and say that'll be reviewed and determined by Buildings Department. And similarly with the curb cuts.
We'll attend to both.
Okay, good. Are there any questions for the applicant? No. Any speakers on this item? No speakers, we will close the hearing.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
If you can submit to us on April 22nd, we can vote this out on May 6th.
Thank you.
May 6th.
May 6th.
New cases. Item number 6, calendar number 45756BZ, 152 through 154 India Street, Brooklyn, Rothkrug, Inspector.
Good morning, Adam Rothkrug.
All right, we had a few questions. Commissioner Hinkson?
Yes, could you clarify which building this lot is, I guess, attached to, adjacent?
Yeah, as you're facing the lot, it's the warehouse building on the right. Or
That's 148?
that's 148, I believe.
148 has a CO that says it's a two-family house. Can you
No,
explain
then it's not 148. We'll provide the, it's been a warehouse building for, 50 or 60 or more years, so we can provide the.
Could you provide some backup for that?
Yes,
We
absolutely.
do have a CO that says it's a two-family house.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think that, definitely never was a two-family house, and we'll provide it for the board.
Great, thank you.
I think at some point there was some, I think at some point, it may be 152. There was some confusion with the numbers, I believe, going way back in history, but we'll provide you with that.
Clarify it.
Sure.
Great.
All right, Commissioner Montanez?
Yes, since it's accessory to whatever building it's associated with, are they both under the same ownership?
Yes.
And you'll show that?
Yeah.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Yes.
I have not been to the site, but by the pictures, you do have barbed wire and it's adjacent to residential. And I'm not entirely sure it's necessary considering you have, according to your signage, your premises are under a 24-hour camera surveillance and you also have a guard dog. So,
I don't think there's a guard
well,
dog.
there is a sign that
Yeah.
says beware of guard dog.
Wow. Is that why you didn't go visit? No, there is no guard dog. We're not really adjacent to residential. The building next to us is a bombed-out, vacant, derelict building that has been the scene of a bunch of incidents, and it's not occupied at the current time. There have been some, according to the owner, some dead bodies found there. So it's not actively residential and hasn't been for a couple of years, and it is a little bit of a security situation because no one's living there. So that's the reason for the barbed wire. The owner wants to keep it for security. I would say we wouldn't object to a condition which says that it would be removed at such time as that building is actually occupied or restored.
Well, actually, that's not necessarily the one that I'm really concerned with. The one that I think that from the pictures you're talking about, the one that's on the side lot line.
Correct.
Yeah, no, you've got barbed wire on the street side.
Okay. That,
And I don't
And that
think
faces
that's
That could-
necessary because it's facing residential and pedestrians are walking back and forth.
that could be removed, but we would prefer to keep it on the side lot line for the current
I
time.
think what you're talking about as to the side.
Yes.
That's fine. I
Okay.
understand that.
All right, any other questions? Any speakers on this item? Any speakers? All right, Mr. Rothrow, can you submit to us in 2 weeks? You have to remove the
2 weeks. What's that?
You're going to remove the barbed wire, so.
Yeah, I want to leave enough time to remove the barbed wire, but
3 weeks?
2 weeks, let's make it 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
Yeah,
All
if
right,
that's okay.
so that's April 29th, and we can have the hearing on May 13th.
Thanks very much.
Item number 7, calendar number 19296BZ, 1832 through 1854, 86th Street, Brooklyn, Sheldon Lobel.
Good morning, Elizabeth Bennett from Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. As you know, this application seeks to remove the 25-year term limitation associated with the variance originally granted that permitted a use group 10 large retail store at the premises. I understand that you had some questions yesterday, and I'd like to just start by addressing those briefly. As to the notice of the hearing, we'd be happy to do that if you feel it's necessary. I just did want to note that the Community Board 11 had requested that we provide them with our property owners list of property owners within 400 feet so that they could provide notice for the Community Board hearing. So they did provide notice for the Community Board hearing. So, in that respect, property owners have already been notified and have had the opportunity to participate. Also, I wanted to note that the property owner went around to property owners in the area seeking support and actually obtained 37 letters in support of the project from local business owners and property owners. And I'd be happy to submit a copy of those letters. 19 of them were from people within 400 feet of the premises. So, of course, as I said, we'd be happy to notify if you feel it's necessary, but property owners have already had an opportunity to participate. Secondly, Marshalls, it is the intent that Marshalls will remain the tenant there. Of course, we can't predict the future, but both the property owner and Marshalls are happy with the relationship. And, one of the reasons for approaching the board with this request was to provide Marshalls a more stable lease. And then lastly, the barbed wire at the parking lot is there because people were breaking in and doing graffiti on the walls on the rear wall of the building. So the property owner installed that barbed wire a few years ago to try to prevent that, which it had been successful in, stopping the graffiti.
the property owner is open to removing it if you feel it's necessary, but the reason it's there is to try to stop the graffiti problem he was having. And then as far as the parking lot, it is used by employees only, and it's locked at night. There's a fence surrounding the parking lot. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Sure. Commissioner Otley Brown?
Well, that was my question, because the barbed wire is adjacent to a residential home. And if you can secure that lot in another way through a camera, that would actually be a better solution for the neighbor. They shouldn't have to have that adjacent to them.
Okay, yeah, I spoke with the property owner yesterday, and he said he'd be open to considering other options and removing the barbed wire. So if you feel that's necessary, then we'll do that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, are there other questions? Are there any speakers on this item? All right, I think it'd be helpful if you, I understand the community board asked you to do that, but I think we just want to make sure you do notify people. It's within our record as well.
Okay.
And if you could just alert them to the fact that, I just want it to be clear that they're aware that you're recommending or requesting to eliminate the term.
Okay.
Okay? And so we'll give you an opportunity to do that and also get back to us on a couple of these issues that were raised and whether the owners are prepared to remove the barbed wire and whether they've done that and
Okay.
replace it with another system.
Okay.
Okay? So can you submit to us in, let's see, why don't we have the hearing on May 6th? So if you can submit to us on April 22nd, and that should give you enough time to notify people within the 400-foot radius.
Okay, great. Is it possible that we could close the hearing for decision, provided that there aren't any additional issues that arise at the hearing?
Well, we're going to have the hearing. Let's see if any of the neighbors come by and
Okay.
raise any issues.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Item number 8, calendar number 1600BZ, 244-04 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens. Vassalotti Associate Architects.
Good morning, Hiram Rothkrug for Vassalotti Associates. We attended executive session yesterday and agree that the landscaping needs to be redone. And now that the winter's over, that will be tended to immediately. Additionally, there's a question with regard to our signage where the station is currently a Citgo branded station, but we show Sunoco. The station is about to become a Sunoco station.
Okay.
So, and that's in the next 30 or 60 days. So we wanted to put what the new signage is going to be on the plans. Additionally, we know that there's a vacuum on the station that's not shown on the plans. If the board has no objection to it, we'll amend the plans to include the vacuum.
Well, actually, I think there's 3 vacuums and an air pump. And I believe the adjacent building is a residential building?
I'm going to leave this up to the board. We can either remove everything, or we can ask for 1 or 2. It's up to the board. I have no objection to.
But is the adjacent building a residential building?
I'd have to review that. If the adjacent building is a residential building, we can either put a time restriction on a vacuum, or we can eliminate the vacuum. And what I'd like to do is, when I get back to my office, I'll look at it and I'll come up with something that everybody can agree upon.
Okay,
and
that's it.
provide to the board in writing.
All right. Were there any other questions? Any speakers on this item? Okay, so we can continue the hearing. You're going to do the planting, right? So should give it
Yes.
3 weeks?
That's fine.
So that's April 29th. And we'll have the hearing on May 13th.
Thank you very much.
Item number 9, calendar number 24709BZ, 123 East 55th Street, Manhattan. Kramer, Levin, Naftalis, and Frankel.
Hi, good morning. Sheila Pozon from Kramer Levin, Naftalis, and Frankel,
here on behalf of Central Synagogue, the applicant. I'm joined by Gary Tarnoff from Kramer Levin, and Livia Thompson and Michael Gamzon from Central Synagogue. I wanted to address the issues that were raised during yesterday's review session with respect to the owner's authorizations. As you know, we did request that each of the other owners on the combined zoning lot deliver those owner authorizations. I'm happy to report that we've received 2 out of the 3, and we will be formally submitting the 2, one from the townhouse to the west, which is Lot 9, another from the hotel to the east, which was Lot 12, and we're in the process of securing the one from the commercial tower to the north, which is Lot 63. We expect to receive it shortly. We'll formally submit that as well. So if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to address those.
All right, so your representation is basically you're going to get the owner's authorization. You've almost completed it, it's just going to take a couple of weeks, is that right? Or
Yes, and if the Tower 56 owner is, they say they will deliver it, but if they don't in a timely manner, then we'll submit all of the materials evidencing our attempts to secure the authorization, and we'll request a formal waiver.
Okay. All right, any questions? Any speakers on this item? All right, well, what I'd like to do is, I think we can close the hearing based on your representation that you're going to get the authorization. If, in fact, you have to request a waiver, I think you have already put in the record that you've notified the 3 buildings, correct?
Correct.
I think we'd want you then to also notify them that, that there is going to be a hearing. And while we'll close the hearing today, if in fact the owner does not authorize it and comes before us, then we'll reopen to hear their testimony.
Understood.
Okay? But for now, I think we can close the hearing.
Wonderful, thank you.
We leave the record open for you to submit the last authorization. And I don't know if I asked, are there any speakers on this item? If no speakers, we close the hearing.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Chair Srinivasan,
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson,
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez,
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
We'll decide this on April 29th.
The next item, item number 10, calendar number 14292BZ, will be heard at the end of the zoning calendar along with 289-13BZ. Appeals calendar. Decision items, item number 11, calendar number 12313A, 86 Bedford Street, Manhattan, Brian Cave.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I'm Phyllis Arnold for Brian Cave.
You've asked for an adjournment?
We are close to permit. We've asked for 3 weeks in hopes that by the time we see you again for decision, we will have it in hand.
Okay, so why don't we defer this to May 6th?
That would be great. Thank you.
Item number 12, calendar number 15613A, 450 West 31st Street, Manhattan, Brian Cave.
Phyllis Arnold again for the applicant.
Yes, we're not reopening the hearing. We did receive a letter from you as the appellant requesting a withdrawal without prejudice. We have also received a letter from the Buildings Department requesting that the board deny this request based on the fact that the board's decision has implications on public policy, and I would recommend that the board proceed with decision on this matter, given that this is an issue of interpretation which applies not only to this site, but other sites as well. Do the commissioners have any issues with that? No. All right. Make a motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan,
No.
Vice Chair Collins, Commissioner Hinkson,
No.
Commissioner Montanez,
No.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
All righty. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Item number 13, calendar numbers 307 and 30813A, 96 and 100 Bell Street, Staten Island, Joseph M. Moraes.
Hello, good morning, Eric Palatnik on behalf of Mr. Maurice.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan,
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson,
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez,
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown.
Thank you.
New case. Item number 14, calendar number 33-14A, 902 Quentin Road, Brooklyn, Rothkrug, and Spector.
Good morning, Adam Rothberg. As the board is aware, we do not believe that 11311 applies to the portion of this property that is zone C42. We believe that because of the reference in the section to underlying district bulk regulations and specific reference to Article 2, Chapter 3, in which there's no reference to a C42. You won't find underlying district regulations. A C42 doesn't have a underlying residential district. The DOB, we believe, is impermissibly or erroneously stretching the language to find that reference to a residential equivalent is the same as a underlying residential district. We've done some additional research, and we will ask the board to allow us to make a subsequent submission from today's hearing. But generally, if you read the original City Planning Commission report, as well as even the DOB's current letter in support of their interpretation, and you try to apply it to this particular property and this particular block, you find almost no relevance. Going back to the 1920s and certainly through the 1970s, there is no residential presence on this block. It appears in 1920s. In 1920, there was one house on this block, and that appears to have been replaced by a commercial building, which we believe, and we'll do the research, existed well before 1970. Not only on this block, but on the corners and area generally surrounding or immediate to this particular block and site, you don't find any notable residential presence. So that when you read through the findings and what city planning was trying to do with the enactment of the Ocean Parkway Special District, you find that it really doesn't have any relevance, or if you read it hand in hand when looking at this block, you don't see what they would need to protect. None of the findings really apply here.
Right, but the text applies not only to this site, right, but to other commercial districts now and in the future.
There's almost, with the exception of this block, there's a very limited application or almost no application, because there are not, you have C8 districts which are clearly not covered because they have no residential equivalent or underlying district, and you have very little area within the Ocean Parkway District, which is the same as this particular C4 district that, again, is a straight commercial district with no residential. And we can provide that, again, what other areas within the special district that this language applies to, but it's a very limited area.
Right, but it seems it's a broader issue. It's not necessarily maybe so fine-tuned to where the zoning districts are, but what the intent was. And if you read the City Planning Commission report, it says all new community facility developments and enlargements will be limited to residential bulk regulations of the underlying district. And I think it's hard to say that a C42 district doesn't have an underlying residential bulk regulation. It does.
No, doesn't. There's an equivalent. There's a residential equivalent, but it's not underlying.
There is an underlying bulk regulation that applies to residential buildings.
Well,
this sounds like a semantic argument, but it's...
Well, it's an important semantic argument, and there is, again, a direct reference to Article 2, Section 3, Article 2, Chapter 3,
right.
Which, again, you won't find any reference to C4-3. You have to make a jump to another section that's not covered in the language. But we also...
Although the only thing I would say is that the way the text is written is that it does say all districts, so one does have to look at the C42 district and question what is the underlying residential bulk regulations. If you go to Article 3, which is the commercial regulations, you'll find how it sends you back to...
That's right, but that's only if you make the jump that city planning intended this provision. Now...
But I'm just going by the text.
No, I
How
understand,
you would
but...
navigate through this.
No, I understand that 100%, but
Okay.
that interpretation results in two other incongruous results, one of which we've cited and one of which I'll explain now, and that is the concept that although community facilities, that the special permit would not apply to a C4 district, which, if the special permit is going to apply in all residential districts and all other commercial districts, and then you're taking what is by its nature a denser district, a heavier commercial district, and you're saying within this district that the special permit doesn't apply, that really raises a result that really does not seem to make sense with the language of the section and what the intent was. And you could take that one step further, which is that if you look at the other commercial overlay districts in which there is an underlying residential district, you end up with a strange result, and that is that, for example, if you take there's an R6A with a C14 overlay within the special district. Within that district, you're entitled to a 2.0 commercial. The community facility, even being reduced from the 3 as of right to the residential equivalent, which still results in a FAR that's over the 2.0 commercial district, so that the community facility, even reduced to the residential FAR, still gets the benefit of a residential FAR that is higher than the commercial district. If you take, there's R5 district with a C21 overlay. So within that district, the commercial FAR is 1. The community facility FAR, even if it's reduced to the residential FAR, you still end up with a 1.25. So in both of these districts, the community facility FAR still exceeds what is permitted for a straight commercial use. Now, when you take a C4 district, which is a much denser commercial district, and the result of this is that you're entitled to a 3.4 commercial FAR, but according to city planning and the Department of Buildings, your community facility FAR is reduced to a 0.78. Again, that's a result that just flies in the face of what would be the intent of this special district. So, again, as applied to this district, you have the fact that there is no residential development historically within this area. You have the fact that these results with regard to applying the equivalent residential FAR or not being entitled to apply for the special permit seem to unfairly or erroneously or, again, without any type of relationship to what the intent of the zone was, penalize community facilities within a C4 district and actually favor commercial development as opposed to, and larger commercial development as opposed to community facility. And those results do not seem consistent with the intent or with legal interpretation.
Okay, I know some of the commissioners, including myself, commented on the inconsistencies in terms of policy overall in these districts. And I think what would be helpful to us, which I noted yesterday, was that in its original form, the Ocean Parkway District was much broader. It said, all community facility developments and enlargements shall be subject to the underlying bulk regulations of Article 2, Chapter 3. And then it goes on to say that you could apply for a certification. So it didn't really have these 4 exemptions that now exist. I think it's worthwhile to go and look at, find the City Planning Commission report, and it may give us some hints as to what was intended when they changed that certification and applied it to only few instances, like as they've noted right now. So that's one question I have. The second question I have is, you've made a distinction between commercial overlays and commercial districts. And can you explain to me why they're distinguished? In your papers, you said that Article 2, Chapter 3 regulations would apply to the residential districts and the commercial overlay districts, but not to the C42 district.
Right.
And where are you getting that distinction?
Well, by the language itself, we're relating to an underlying residential district. When you have a C1 or C2, those are almost always referred to commercial overlays. and you have an
But
underlying.
I'm just trying to understand how you navigate through the zoning resolution. For example, if you go to Article 2, Chapter 3, does it discuss the C1 and C2 overlays? The same reason that you said the C42 is not mentioned over there. I'm just trying to
I
understand.
believe it
the logic.
does, yes.
Okay, I'm
I
just-
believe it does, and we'll expand upon that
Okay,
that
if you
point.
could explain that to us. And I think the other thing is that if you really want to talk about, I guess there are two issues here. One is that there's the text itself and what it says, and if you follow that text, where does it get you? And the second is, well, it seems like it's inconsistent in terms of public policy, and there's some unintended results. I think those are two separate issues.
It's only a separate issue if you believe that the intent of city planning was to apply these in C42 districts, and we don't believe that was we don't believe that was the intent. It may have been an oversight, and it may have been in C8 districts. Clearly, it didn't apply. And the reference to the underlying districts, again, in our mind, relate to, again, districts that have overlays and underlying residential, as opposed to a straight commercial district in which, again, there's no reference to Article 2, Section 3. And to find the commercial overlay, you have to go to a completely different section of the zoning resolution that's not cited in the section. So we think the language is consistent, if not, not 100% clear. And we believe that, again, the reasons that I just set forth with regard to what the development of this area was, why it didn't need this protection, and two, these incongruous results that this area wouldn't be entitled to the special permit, and that community facilities would actually be less advantageous than commercial development from a straight floor area ratio, which, again, is inconsistent with how this ratio applies, because in all the other districts, again, the community facility FAR, even as reduced, is still greater than the commercial FAR. Throughout zoning, and the whole purpose of having this increased FAR for community facility is that the inherent benefits of community facilities and that they are encouraged as opposed to commercial development. So it makes no sense that in the densest commercial district that community facilities would be again, prejudiced against, and in fact, you could really argue that this is actually a better location for larger community facilities. In a C4 district, that you'd rather have large community facilities in this area where there are no residences around, and where otherwise you're getting larger commercial buildings. So again, I think you look at the language and look at all these surrounding reasons that it makes a compelling argument as to why the DOB's interpretation doesn't really make sense.
Okay, questions for the applicant? All right, I think the other thing that would be helpful is, I don't know if you can provide us a chart. I think the issue of unintended results vis-à-vis these districts would be helpful. So you understand some kind of chart, and I think it's worthwhile that anyway, whatever submission you make to us, you also submit to city planning. I know that the letter they submit, it wasn't really submitted into this record. I think you attached it, the buildings department attached it, and it was an inquiry that you made to city planning separate from this appeal. Is that correct?
That's correct, because
right,
we couldn't imagine that if the DOB was going to interpret it this way, that then
right,
we would
okay.
not be entitled to at least go for the special permit.
For this certification?
Absolutely.
All right, so it's worthwhile to send that to them as well, and perhaps we can get them to comment, not so much on the issue of that exemption, which was the basis of that letter, but more about the legislative intent of this section overall.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Buildings Department, Ms. Arantia?
Good morning, Lisa Orantia for the Buildings Department. The department properly denied this new building application because it straddles the two zoning districts. In part, it's in the C42, and the special district regulation has broad applicability language It says all community facility buildings and portions of buildings containing community facility uses are directed to the bulk regulations of Article 2, Chapter 3, which means that the community facility FAR limitation will apply in C districts with residential equivalents. We looked at the city planning reports, and although they're not precise because they don't say in which districts the community facility limitation applies, but we don't find anything in those reports that contradicts how DOB is applying the statute. And in fact, we are being consistent with the legislative intent to protect residences from large community facility uses by imposing this limitation in the C42. And as was discussed earlier, city planning's opinion supports DOB. They found in their letter that the community facility uses are limited to residential FAR of the relevant district rather than the community facility FAR of the underlying zoning district regulations. The city planning concludes that for the C42 portion of the lot, the maximum residential FAR applies to the community facility use within that portion. We heard the board's concerns yesterday, which is that the special district regulations, they initially allowed certification in all districts, and the text was later amended to add the 4 exemptions, which appear to make the certification available only in the R6 and R7 without letter suffix, and the board asked if there's an explanation for this restriction. We looked at the 1993 CPC report, and we spoke to city planning staff, but there's nothing in the report or their records that would explain why the certification is only available in the R6 and R7. And by the way, it's also only available on corner lots that have frontage on a wide street, so it would not be in every case in the
But it would be in
R6
this
and
case
7.
normally otherwise,
In this
right?
specific
Because
case.
it's at a corner.
That's right. Whether or not to make the certification available in the C42 is a city planning determination. It's not DOB's decision. The appellant wants to use that denial from city planning to challenge DOB's determination, but this appeal, that issue is not before the board. Whether or not there's relief from the special district FAR limitation doesn't prove whether the limitation is invalid, and it doesn't prove that DOB's decision is wrong.
The only thing I would say is that it does seem like an inconsistency, and one way of looking at it is that when they revised the text and they made the exemption to R6 and R7 districts on corner lots, they didn't say the commercial equivalence because this section doesn't apply to C42 to begin with. So that's one way of looking at it, and that's why I want to understand why, and we can read the report, whether that report hints to the fact that why they made this distinction. And the only reason it seems to me that they didn't include the commercial equivalence is because the commercial equivalence or the C4 districts were not applicable to begin with. So they didn't have to make the exception. So that's one sort of rationale. But otherwise, it seems that they would articulate why they distinguish the commercial districts from the residential districts when they made that exception.
We can submit the report to the board, but as I said, there's really, it's not helpful on that point. We don't think that there is enough in that report. We don't think there's anything in that report to really overcome the broad language of the statute. It raises an interesting question, but there's not enough there to prove that this interpretation is incorrect.
Okay.
And in fact, we asked city planning how many times has the certification been issued, and they found that they only had 4 applications in the late 1970s and 1980s, which would lead, it suggests that the certification is not a significant aspect of the way the scheme works in the special district. You just don't have that many people coming forward asking for it.
Right, and it may be because Ocean Parkway, I think the R6 and R7 districts are not as widely mapped as some of the other districts. I think the R3 and R4 and R5 are probably more mapped in Ocean Parkway.
But even before,
You mean even when it was
yeah,
applied to every?
that's correct.
Okay.
When any district could apply for it, it was rare to have someone come in and ask for it. And the second question the board raised is, they noted that there was a hierarchy of bulk in the special district where you have the most restrictive areas in the C districts that allow the residential use. And wouldn't it make more sense to have more bulk allowed for community facilities in the C districts? Again, we looked at the reports and we spoke to city planning. It was city planning who suggested the explanation that even though there's nothing to be found in their record, there's this implicit idea in the 1976 report that uses allowed in the C districts, which are both residential and commercial, needed protection from the large community facility bulk. And that's why this statute was written this way.
It's, I have to say, it defies logic a little bit. It doesn't seem to make sense that C1, C2 overlay districts have one exemption, residential has the same exemption. You could have a C4 district and they could do 3 FAR commercial, and then there's somehow community facilities limited to the least amount possible amongst all these districts. I think there's a general notion that community facility is more compatible with residential than commercial, as a rule, because there are large portions of the city that are mapped residential, which doesn't allow any commercial, but allows community facilities. So maybe city planning sort of backing into that answer. We can reach out to them as well, but I'd like to get a fuller explanation. And it's very possible that the text was written in such a way which has an unintended result, and perhaps a text change is the way to go. But to somehow say the intent was this is, just for me, it's hard to accept.
I understand, it is a confusing statute to understand, but like I said, there's not enough in the record to show us, given this broad applicability language, that our interpretation is incorrect.
Okay.
We're not going to question the planning scheme that that is straightforward in the text. We have to apply it as it reads.
Okay.
I wanted to make one comment about a point that was made about there being no residents on this block. The department can't change the wording of the text. We don't have the discretion to vary the zoning resolution based on actual use.
Understood. Any questions for Ms. Sarantia? All right. Any other speakers on this item? Are there speakers on this item? Yes, okay. Please come forward. You'll be given 3 minutes each.
Morning, my name is Abraham Ackerman. I am the filing rep for the architect on this project. I'd like to respond to the 2 of the arguments, one that was made by the board and one that was made by the DOB. The board, is focusing on the fact that it says all community facility buildings shall be subject to the applicable underlying district. So, in simple meaning, you would understand that since there's a residential equivalent, so the C4 should be subject. DOB is also making an argument that since following the heading of 11311, it doesn't list out only our districts, and sort of bolstering the word all. So that sends everything to Article 2, Chapter 3. The issue with both of those items is, what about a C8, which this building is mainly located in? Shouldn't the C8 ostensibly also be sent to Article 2, Chapter 3, and need to comply with the residential FAR for a C8 for a community facility building in the Special Ocean Parkway District? And since there's no underlying residential for a C8, so the FAR should be 0, if you want to get literal. So,
Okay.
what do I want to do with that? What I want to do with that is that it says shall be subject to the applicable underlying district. Now, where I come from, you have to ask yourself, why does it say the word applicable? Why does it say the word underlying? Based on everything I'm hearing today, it could just say applicable. If it would say shall be subject to the applicable district bulk regulations for Article 2, Chapter 3, sorry, the effect would be the same. My feelings is that the word underlying here is it's being utilized as the flip side of the term overlay, which is a bona fide zoning term. There is something called an overlay district. And the point of using the word underlying here is to tell you that when you're not dealing with a district that is an underlying type of residential district, that it's not even sending you there. So,
I understand what you're saying.
in terms
You're
of the
saying-
semantics, so I'm saying the semantics, I think, makes sense if you ask yourself that by not using the semantics, what's going to be with C8? That's the point I want to bring out.
Okay.
And just one more thing. If you go through the city planning discussion in 77, leading to the formation of the district, which was actually attached to the determination sent to the, submitted to the DOB, and it's attached to the appellant statement. 4 times it says, due to the fact that almost no undeveloped land is available, these facilities must, of necessity, either convert or demolish sound residential structures. Another place, these facilities, whether newly constructed or converted, are often located on totally residential blocks. These community facilities uses often result in a great degree of disruption caused by placing a heavily used facility into a previously serene residential setting. As more community facilities continue to locate within this community, by converting and enlarging residential structures or by replacing sound housing with much larger community facility buildings, the problems will become more acute. They show time and time again that they're concerned with residential buildings being taken off. So I think it's sensible, based on what I'm demonstrating, that they did not intend to send a C4, just like they didn't intend to send a C8. If they did intend to send a C8, it should be 0 FAR for community facility.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? All right.
So as I said, some of the points we made today were not addressed in our original papers, so we would like to submit as well as to respond to, again, some of the questions the board asked, and we would like 3 weeks.
All right. I think what would be helpful, we'll give you 3 weeks, and we'll allow the Buildings Department to respond back. Just a couple of comments. If you're giving us City Planning Commission reports, can you make sure that they're clean copies without highlights? Because it's very hard to read some.
Absolutely.
The architect actually made an interesting comment about the use of the word applicable and underlying, and noted that if underlying was meant to apply to C4 districts, then you don't, it's like almost like redundancy. I'd be curious to know, and maybe you could do a quick search of the zoning resolution and see where they use the word underlying zoning districts. And I wonder if in other sections of the zoning, when they use the word underlying, they're really not talking about the high C zones. I wonder if it's used consistently. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Mr. Ranti, do you want to say anything into the record? Okay, so we'll set a schedule, and we'll continue the hearing. So, Mr. Rothkrug, you said you want 3 weeks?
Yes.
Okay, so that's April 29th. And, Mr. Ranti, can you submit back to us on May 13th? Okay, and we can continue the hearing on May 20th.
Thank you very much.
Zoning calendar. Decision items. Item number 1, calendar number 6212BZ, 614, 618 Morris Avenue, the Bronx, Anchorman Centerfit.
Good morning, Sarah Farhadian with Ackerman Centerfit for the applicant.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 2, calendar number 7712BZ, 91 Franklin Avenue, Brooklyn, Moisha M. Friedman.
Good morning, C. Friedman for the applicant, Friedman P.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 3, calendar number 30312BZ, 1106 through 1108, Utica Avenue, Brooklyn. Eric Palatnik.
Hello, good morning, Eric Palatnik.
Oh, we'll defer the decision to May 6th.
Thank you.
Item number 4, calendar number 16013BZ, 1171 through 1175, East 28th Street, Brooklyn. The law office of Frederick A. Becker.
Good morning, Larry J. Altman from the Law Office of Frederick A. Becker.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 5, calendar number 17713BZ, 134 Langham Street, Brooklyn. Eric Palatnik.
Good morning, Eric Palatnik.
Motion to grant? Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 6, calendar number 20713BZ, 177 Hastings Street, Brooklyn. Harold Weinberg.
Good morning, Frank Shalito for Harold Weinberg.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 7, calendar number 26813BZ, 2849 Cropsey Avenue, Brooklyn. Belkin, Burden, Wenig, and Golden.
Good morning, Bob Jacobs, Belkin, Burner, Winnick, and Goldman.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you very much.
Item number 8, calendar number 27613BZ, 1629 First Avenue, Manhattan. Francis R. Angelino.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 9, calendar number 29013BZ, 2244 Church Avenue, Brooklyn. Herrick Feinstein.
Good morning, Commissioners. Arthur High, Eric Feinstein for the applicant.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 10, calendar number 30613BZ, 3766 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn. Louis C. Garfield.
Good morning, Eric Palatnik, on behalf of Mr. Garfinkel.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 11, calendar numbers 3414BZ and 49883BZ, 2131 Highland Boulevard, Staten Island. Rampula Associate Architects.
Good morning, Philip L. Rampula.
Motion to grant?
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
Thank you very much.
Continued hearings. Item number 12, calendar number 29912BZ, 40 through 56 10th Avenue, Manhattan. Goldman Harris.
Good morning, Commissioners. Howard Goldman for the applicant. I was at review session yesterday, and we're available to answer any further questions that the board might have.
All right. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
All right. We may have questions afterwards, but for
Thank
now,
you.
fine. Yes, Mr. Corby?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Commissioners, and I once again appreciate your heavy scrutiny of this application.
I'm sorry, please state your name for the
I'm sorry,
record.
Mitch Corby. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Appreciate very much your heavy scrutiny of this application, and we understand that it has changed since the beginning, and we appreciate that. We also understand that finally the applicant has chosen to respond to the many points that we've raised in their most recent submittal. What I'd like to do is just speak for another minute or so and segue right to our financial consultant and then come back and wrap it up. But I would like to say that this for us has been about how, of course, it affects us, but it's also been more importantly about the application itself. We've felt from the very beginning that there are times when the board simply has to say no. There are times when a site is a development site in a neighborhood that is one of the most attractive neighborhoods for development in the city. And the board needs to say no when an application just can't meet the findings. And this one continues to fail time and time again to do that on the basics and on the fundamentals. So I'd like Mark Nackley to come up and just speak once again about the cap rate issue, which I know we've said over and over again and stressed over and over again. The applicant continues to say, well, this is the standard procedure. We are using the approach that's always used. Well, if that's true, and I suppose we're okay with that, that same approach was used 2 doorbells down for the Romanoff case. And in that case, in 2008, during the financial crisis, the cap rate was 6.75. The cap rate for this project during an economic revitalization, clearly, is 7.5. It just doesn't wash. If we're using the same rationale the board has always used, we can challenge that rationale, but let's not. Let's just use it, okay? If we accept that rationale, that standard operating procedure, in this case, it just doesn't work if you look at a site that was just a couple doors down. So Mark is going to stress that again, and we've mentioned this over and over again, and we feel like the response just hasn't been adequate. So I'd rather not dwell on that because Mark's a financial expert. Let him do that, and I'll come back and just speak about 1 or 2 more things if I can. Thank you so much. Mark?
Okay. State your name for the record.
Mark Nackley. Madam Chair, good morning. I'm a senior director in the valuation and advisory group of Cushman & Wakefield, and our expertise is in the valuation of commercial real estate in New York City. So I'm here to talk about methodology. As Mitch explained, it is still our opinion that the cap rate used in the as-of rate analysis is extremely high and results in an overstated negative value on the as-is scenario. We continue to stress this because the cap rate is the most sensitive input into the whole analysis. A minor change in the cap rate has a very drastic change, and it is the most important input into this whole analysis. So Mr. Freeman relied on a survey of national investors in similar projects and arbitrarily picked between a range of 5.62 and 14.67, spread of over 9%, where you could have just picked anywhere in between. Now, we're in Manhattan, New York City, Midtown South, the most highly sought-after area for investors and tenants. Why they wouldn't be on the lowest end of the range is beyond me. This is, again, a national survey where you're talking to investors all over the country. It's to me, incomprehensible that we wouldn't be at the lowest end of the range. And again, I'd like to point out that solely relying on a survey and not even attempting to look at transactions in the market is inconsistent with all real estate valuation methodology taught in schools, colleges, and for licensing for brokers, appraisers, you name it. You first look to the market to provide your support. If you need a check of reasonableness, or you have no data, which is not the case here, but if you want a check of reasonableness, then you would go to the survey. In relationship to the Romanoff cap rate, it is not opinion, but it is a fact that the cap rate used for this project should be lower than that used in the Romanoff analysis. The Romanoff analysis was, and the application was put in 2008, 2009, in the depth of the financial crisis. And in Mr. Freeman's response to the opposition letter, he said that rate was aggressive and the rate used for this one is conservative. Now, since that application was submitted, many there have been a lot of major real estate transactions in the area around the subject property. Google has purchased 111 8th Avenue for $1.9 billion with a B dollars, a 2.1 million square foot office building, and they're still in the market for additional space in the area. Chelsea Market looking to expand. 51 Astor was built on spec, is leasing space at $110 per square foot, and they have one floor left. 837 Washington was just opened by Thor and Taconic.
Your time is up, so is there a way you
Okay.
can just...
Basically, the cap rate used and the theory that the Romanoff rate should be lower is absolutely contrary to all market data, and it's in fact just wrong.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions? I just had one question. I know that the applicants responded to some of your issues or concerns. Are you looking at, I mean, you've talked about certain buildings on the feasibility, and I think they noted that this is a new development versus the data that you've used, which is based on buildings that actually exist.
Some of those buildings were stabilized, and some of those
Right.
buildings were.
But they were all
if I
buildings
remember
that existed?
correctly, were about 50% occupied. But the cap rate he's applying, or excuse me, the income that he's applying the capitalization rate to, is assuming the building is leased and stabilized at market rent. So you would, in theory, develop a cap rate from a building that is also stabilized and at market rents. However, whether you use those or not, you still have to look at the market data. To completely ignore it and not even attempt to look at what's going on in the market is inconsistent with everything I've ever been taught in my training.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Corby?
Thank you once again so much for indulging us in scrutinizing this case. And I think that as Mark has said, I think it's frankly arbitrary to simply establish this standard when in fact, once again, very close by, arguably the same standard was applied, and yet a cap rate that was significantly different was used. And if you simply applied the Romanoff cap rate to this project, as I understand it, it would break even and it would not be a variance case. In order to address some of the concerns the board has raised and some of the concerns we have raised, this building, of course, has lowered its FAR by doing a scoop out and creating holes, if you will, in the building. Interesting and creative design, I suppose, but not a minimum variance, not the way to address the E finding. There's another approach here. There's an approach here that would meet the findings, and I think meet the E finding, meet the minimum variance, shrink the size of the building, as the board has always asked, without, sort of kind of bells and whistles and a design approach that makes holes in the building to remove floor area, but maintains the height and setback variances that I just don't think are supported by the facts and by the findings. So, once again, as much as we appreciate the board's analysis and ongoing scrutiny and having reduced the size of this, it continues to fail to meet the findings. And yes, it affects our building. And yes, it affects our lot line windows. We know that we're not entitled to those windows. We understand that they'll be blocked. And yes, it's a key concern of ours. But at the same time, what this has always been about is a variance application that just does not pass muster and doesn't meet the findings up and down the line. So once again, very much appreciate it. I hope the board will consider the comments that Mark has made and in light of the totality here and seek a further reduction in this building and if not, refuse to grant the variance altogether. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there other speakers on this item? Any other speakers? All right, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unless the board would like, we're not going to respond to the cap rate issues here because we feel that we've adequately responded on the record, and nothing new has been said today that hasn't been said before. The only thing I would add is that in terms of meeting the findings, there is an uncontested hardship here that has been supported by Langen several times with expert testimony, and absolutely nothing has been submitted by experts in response to that. It is uncontested that there are subsurface conditions here. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more questions? All right, if there are no other speakers, I think what we can do is we can close the hearing. Mr. Corby, do you want to add anything into the, do you want to submit anything to the record?
I don't at this moment, but I would like an opportunity to further provide evidence and materials on the cap rate issue, and I think it continues to be a concern. So if we could leave the record open for a final submission from our financial analyst, I'd very much appreciate that.
Okay, we can do that. We can give you 2 weeks.
Okay.
And Mr. Goldman, you can respond back to that. So that's 2 weeks is April 22nd. Ms. Goldman, you can respond back to us on in a week from there, so April 29th.
Yes.
And we can set the decision date for May 13th.
Thank you.
Make a motion to, close. All right, make a motion to close.
Chair Srinivasan?
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brand? Item number 13, calendar number 31112BZ, 964 Dean Street, Brooklyn. Eric Palatnik.
Hello, good morning, Eric Palatnik. We had requested an adjournment until April 29th.
Right, so when do you want to have your hearing? Sorry.
The papers have already been submitted to the board.
Yes, it's been submitted in dribs and drabs. Can you make sure that you provide one comprehensive
Yes.
submission with a cover letter?
One comprehensive submission went in yesterday.
Oh, did?
Everything went into the board.
All right, so we'll have the hearing on April 29th then.
Thank you.
Item number 14, calendar number 12413BZ, 95 Groton Street, Brooklyn. Rothkrug, Inspector.
Good morning, Adam Rothberg. We did have someone at your executive session, so I think the board still had some questions with regard to the,
Right, I'm just troubled by this analysis and the way it's presented, and I would like you to do certain things to this map, because this is all about looking at other sites. So whether we look at it in terms of 2,500 square feet in two separate lots, I know you've made your argument that they're two individual lots, but I think the board would like to at least see what the effect is if it's considered together, because there's always the potential for assemblage. So on this map, I think you should do a few things. One, I think it'd be helpful if you show the lot lines. I think the base of the map is problematic because it's almost too esoteric. So if you could show us the lot lines, the footprints, the study area boundaries, and the zoning, I think it will clarify a lot. And when you put your table together, I think it would be helpful if you're looking at these common ownership sites, I think you should also give us the total site, the size of the site, instead of
Sure.
requesting the board to add them all up and. Okay?
we
So I think.
we weren't trying to test
No, I
the
know,
board.
I understand that it wasn't, but I think it would stand as a much better study and really help the record.
None of that is a
arguments you're making. Other comments? Commissioner, have any comments? Okay, I know that Commissioner Hinkson agreed with me as well. And I just want to point out a few things. And the reason why I think the study, if you reorganize it, would be better is if you look at this map, you'll see a lot of lots that have not been identified, and it's just unclear why they haven't. So they tend to be gray toned. It says it's vacant land, but it's not identified, so I'm not sure it's within the study area. I'm not sure whether it's in a different zoning district.
I
So it's
understand.
hard for us to really accept the study. Okay?
It could definitely be clearer.
All right, good. Are there any other questions? Any speakers on this item? All right, no speakers. We can bring you back on the 29th if you can do this fairly quickly.
That's fine.
Can you submit to us in a week? Okay, you want to submit?
Yeah, let's submit the 29th, I think. Let 2 weeks, I think we need 2 weeks to
Okay,
submit.
so then why don't you submit on April 22nd? We'll continue the hearing on May 6th.
Thank you.
Item number 15, calendar number 12513BZ, 97 Groton Street, Brooklyn, Rothkrug, Inspector.
I'm going to assume the same comments apply.
Same comments, all right. So, and same schedule, so it's April 22nd and May 6th.
Thank you. Although I would just like to say that, again, we feel very strongly with regard to the recognition of separate ownership and, again, the concept of merging or being
Assembled
is not typically something that we believe, unless there's a demonstrated
Interest?
in selling or merging by either of the parties, which...
Well, in this particular case, it seems like there's definitely the potential to merge, since at least some of the parties are the same in both lots. That's a lot better than analysis that your office has in fact provided to us, talking about potential assemblages where the ownership hasn't been...
No, actually, in all of the other, and we'll demonstrate it more clearly, in all of the other situations on the map, they are in fact in
I
common
understand.
ownership. So
Okay.
that's a significant difference.
Okay.
Thank you.
Item number 16, calendar number 16313BZ, 13310 39th Avenue, Queens, Eric Palatnik.
Hello, good morning, Eric Palatnik.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, good. Any speakers on this item? No speakers, we'll close the hearing.
Thank you.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hingston.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
We'll decide this case on April 29th.
Thank you.
Item number 17, calendar number 24613BZ, 514 49th Street, Brooklyn, Rothkrug, Inspector.
Good morning, Adam Rothberg.
Any questions and comments for the applicant? No. Any speakers on this item? No speakers. We can close the hearing. Can you revise your statement of facts and findings, however, to incorporate some of the additional information that was put together both by the Institute as well as by the analysis that you provided?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would only ask, we can do that within a week.
That's-
The hospital is on a funding deadline, so
Okay,
anything
that's
the
no
board can
problem.
do.
So if you can submit to us on April 15th, we can vote this out on April 29th.
Great.
Motion to close.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hingston.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
Thank you very much.
Item number 18, calendar number 26913BZ, 110 West 73rd Street, Manhattan, the law office of Marvin B. Mitzner.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Marvin Mitzner for the applicant. I understand from the executive session that the board is inclined to have a term attached to this special permit grant. I would ask that the term be 10 years rather than 5 years, because 5-year term is kind of short to allow the financing for the construction as well as any refinancing of the building.
All right, we'll take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any questions for Mr. Mitzner? Okay. Can you, I just had two, not corrections, but revisions that would be helpful to the record. If you could just revise your zoning analysis to talk about the larger zoning lot, that's one. And also if your drawings can clearly show the zoning lot, and you could work with our examiner on that.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
We'll do that.
Any speakers on this item? Any speakers? All right, we can close the hearing. We'll leave the record open for you to submit. If you can submit to us on April 22nd, we can vote this out on May 6th.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Motion to close.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hingston.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 19, calendar number 28913BZ. This item will be called at the end of the BZ calendar along with calendar number 14292BZ. Item number 20, calendar number 29713BZ, 308 Cooper Street, Brooklyn, Sheldon Lobel.
Good morning, Elizabeth Bennett from Sheldon Lobel PC for the applicant. I understand that you had some questions about the status of the environmental review, and I do have James Heineman here from Equity Environmental if you need additional information, but just preliminarily, I wanted to mention that a Phase 2 work plan was submitted, and the Environmental Protection Agency reviewed it and had no major issues with it. We're awaiting comments from the Department of Environmental Protection and the Department of Health. We anticipate receiving those possibly within the next week or so, although we're not certain on the timeline. So we're still waiting to hear back on that. And if you have any further questions about the specifics of the environmental, I'll
Right,
call
can
James
Mr.
up.
Heineman just speak to the?
Sure, no
Okay, that's great.
problem.
Then.
James?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners. James Heineman, Equity Environmental Engineering. As Elizabeth was saying, this project, the reason that EPA and the Department of Health are involved, which they typically, city DEP handles, is that we are across Irving Avenue from a site, the former Wolf Alport site, which was handled, they were involved in the refining and concentrating of thorium, a radioactive element. And as a result, EPA has been doing some investigations and remediation on the Wolf Alport site across the street from us for quite some time. They have done extensive testing within the footprint of the several industrial buildings that were occupied by Wolf Alport, as well as in the sewers out front. They have delineated what they believe to be the extent of soil contamination, which does not include our property. And they've also done testing, as I said, in the sewers as well. Currently, they're in the process of what they refer to as shielding the existing buildings and putting in new concrete floor to prevent any exposure of workers in the building from the contaminated material below. They have determined that, what they have said is that they do not see any concerns regarding workplace use with this shielding in place. They say there may be a potential for issues associated with long-term exposure on the building, the former Wolf Alport building itself. Should note that they have not done any testing on private properties such as ours. And when we contacted EPA, we actually showed them the work plan, and they were okay with it. They asked, they specified the type of radiological testing that we done, and they asked to see the results of the report, which of course we'd be happy to do. As Elizabeth mentioned, the city agencies, DEP and DOH, have also received a copy of our proposed Phase 2 work plan, which does include the radiological survey. We anticipate we should be hearing back from them quite soon. I think on April 1st, we were told that comments were imminent, so hopefully by the end of this week, once we see what what they're asking for, we would then be able to finalize a scope of work for the remedial investigation and proceed. So at this point, we typically in an industrial site, we would be doing Phase 2 investigations in any event for the usual petroleum and metals, et cetera, because of the radiological issue across the street. We'd also be testing for things that are outside what we usually test for, but the same basic process and same basic review, except this case involves the federal EPA as well.
Okay.
So that's essentially where we are.
All right. Any questions? Okay. Thanks, Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Excuse me. Any speakers on this item? All right. I think we can close the hearing.
Okay.
We'll leave the record open, but I just want to give you enough time because there are 3 agencies involved. So why don't we set a decision date for May 13th?
Okay.
Make a motion to close.
Thank you.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
Thanks.
Item number 21, calendar number 31813BZ, 74 Grand Street, Manhattan, Bryan Cave.
Morning. Good morning, Commissioners. Judy Gallant on behalf of the applicant. Just a few housekeeping things. We have submitted revised plans and a financial analysis for a building with a 30-foot rear yard on the site. I just want to point out that the financial analysis on page 2 of the report, there is a typo. It indicates that the annualized total return on investment is 1.47. It should be 1.54. The correct number is in the Schedule A1. It just was not properly put into the letter. In any event, 1.47, 1.54, the project is not feasible. In response to the Commissioner's concerns about light and air and the 20-foot project, we have removed the balconies in the rear of the building with the 20-foot rear yard as proposed. And that shows a annualized total return on investment of 7.05, and we've submitted that revised financial analysis. And then just by way of explanation of the packet of resolutions and the chart that we provided the board, I want to just make clear that we provided copies of every resolution in every case in the last 10 years where the board considered a variance on a vacant lot to allow residential use in a manufacturing zone in Manhattan, and that produced those 18 cases. The chart going through each rear yard condition was just a way of eliminating from the analyses those resolutions where no reference to the rear yard was made, and we tried to hypothesize why that would be. But our only point in including all of those cases really was to establish that whatever the rear yard condition, all of those cases could have more FAR developed on them than our site can because it is uniquely constrained. So the only point of the exercise was to show the unique constraints that I think the board is well aware of.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions for Ms. Gallant? I think we were very satisfied with that response. Any speakers on this item? Any speakers? I think then we can close the hearing. All right. I think we can close the hearing. We'll just we understand that there's ongoing work with DEP, so I just want to make sure that you have enough time or we have enough time so that they can respond and sign off. Okay. So we can close the hearing and we can set the decision date for May 6th. Make a motion to close.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
Thank you.
New cases, item number 22, calendar number 21013BZ, 4312 50th Street, Queens, Sheldon Lobel.
Good morning, Jordan Most from Sheldon Lobel on behalf of the applicant. Actually, I have some photographs. I know there was a question about the yards,
Rear, yes.
rear yards, and the
This way?
side yards.
Watch this.
The rear and the side.
The building is built virtually full on the lot, so the yards are the adjacent properties' yards.
It's just one drawing, is one photograph?
It's one sheet,
Okay,
right, one sheet with two photographs,
Okay.
right. Photograph on the left showing the separation between the buildings that are on the corner, and the photograph on the right is the rear.
And so what we're looking at is the adjacent residential?
Right, from the one on the right?
Yes.
Yeah, the residential building behind the premises.
Okay, and where is the property line? Is the property line where you have the concrete
No,
section?
no,
or is-
I think it's closer. I think it's, I'll have to confirm for you. I think it's really a foot, or the building may be on the lot, it appears to be on the lot line, at least from the plans. I haven't seen an actual survey of the building.
Okay.
But it looks to be, from the plans, it looks to be much tighter than that distance, which looks like roughly maybe 6 feet of concrete on one side of that wall, and maybe another 8 feet of dirt on the other side, or grass.
Right, and you have windows all along that,
Right,
on
so.
both sides, is that correct?
Um,
Well, on the side you have, I can't tell, it doesn't seem like you really have that many windows, but
Yeah, there are small windows. The windows in the back, they're sort of basement windows.
Right.
They're maybe about, they're sort of at the ceiling level, and they come down about 2.5 to 3 feet in the back.
Mhm.
And the windows in the front are higher windows, as you've seen before in other plans. There are no windows on the, trying to get the right orientation on the plan set. There are no windows on the side facing, on the other photo side, facing the other residential buildings on the, so if you're facing the building, no windows on the right side. Within the space, that's where there's locker rooms, offices, on the right side of the space. The rear has windows, and the front has windows. No windows on the left side either, because there's a building adjacent.
Okay. All right. The reason I asked that is because you have, I know along the side you have, I think there's really no exercise space on the side, right?
Correct.
But at the rear, there is. And
Correct.
I just wanted to understand whether you're
I'd say,
proposing some, some kind of screening for light and for noise.
yeah, we haven't had any issues with respect to that. It's not there are no rooms here that are special, aerobic or spinning rooms or rooms that generally have louder music or noise. It's all one space, so it's not particularly noisy. In fact, I'd call attention to the use above me, which is the billiard hall, which has very, very late hours of operation, serves beer, and I think I would be more concerned, not that it's before you, if I was a neighbor, I'd be more concerned about their activity, open till 4 and 5 a.m. Sometimes, and more people hanging out in the front and more noise possibly generated out the back. Anyway, with respect to your answer, there's no high noise generating use that's going on in the space. It's just sort of the general ambient use and some music, but not a sort of a loud thumping thing going on. There are no particular proposed measures.
Okay. All right. I think you should think about it. I understand there's a billiard space above, but that's not before us, so we have no responsibility. to that.
Understood, yeah, right.
But I think here you have a situation where you're asking for variance for the space to be used as a PCE. It does adjoin residential at the rear. You will have hours that go up to 12 o'clock at night, and we just want to understand, I think, maybe give us a more full explanation. I'd love to see some photographs of the rear windows that you have.
Okay, we can do that, and I can find out what the rating is of those windows. It may not be a big deal to replace those windows with a better sound rated
Right.
classification. I assume that's what you're referring to.
Right, and I was also wondering whether there's, I wanted to know where the lot line was, because in fact, if the lot line gives you some space, there's possibilities of screening it as well.
Okay.
So you could put up a fence, or you could do something to block off any light into the adjacent residential.
Right, we could also arrange to make sure that whatever, in the evening, that there's no reason for any windows to be leaving the space. There can be shades that can be drawn as soon as it's dark. There's no reason for
All right, if you can get back to us on that. Commissioner Martinez?
Yes, I was wondering if you had thought about community facility use. I know the office use in the basement had very low rents, but...
Right, I mean, I spoke with the financial consultant, and they indicated that the rents would be comparable anyway for that type of use. I can get a letter from them, I'm sure, that would indicate that those would be a comparable sort of situation.
Okay, and there would be handicap access to this building?
There is, actually. There is a lift in this, there's a lift as you walk in on that entrance.
I see there's a door
And
to the left of the main door, but there's no door on your floor plan.
You're correct, but if you actually look at the photo,
Yes.
that door is there, and I'll make a note that door should be reflected on the plan.
Yes. Then the other question I had was regarding signage, which is very well illustrated also on your photo.
Yes, I see that.
There's a banner on the wall, in addition to the wall sign and a 3-sided awning with signage.
I'm going to check the photo I'll tell you just with regard to, for disclosure purposes, the photo on the right was taken by the applicant yesterday. The photo on the left is from Google, so I don't know exactly what the timing of that is. I'll make sure that if the signage is the same to find out.
It is still
Okay.
there.
It's still there.
Yes.
So, okay, we'll address that.
Okay, were there other questions? Yes.
You talk about the infeasibility of renting that large space to just one user, and you make mention of the fact that retail and office spaces in the area are generally around 4,000 square feet each, but you don't provide any survey information as backup for that statement.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
And I did have a question on the financials. I don't know if you heard yesterday about the leasing cost.
With respect to the brokerage commission? I think that should be, well, I guess it would be applied to an as-of-right, it should be applied to the as-of-right scenario, but
It is applied to the as-of-right, but shouldn't it be applied to the proposed, because that's a legalization, and generally you're starting from ground zero with a legalization.
right, although I guess the theory was we weren't because they're already there, so it wasn't applied as the use is in place, because it's more of a,
I mean, all it will do is equal out your equation and make your case
Okay.
for a minimum there.
right.
All right, and I just had one other comment. Any other questions? Okay, just on your A finding, I think it'd be helpful to also explain why it's not feasible to enlarge the building. Because you could get more revenue by actually developing this to its full build-out, right? This is a district which allows 4 FAR. Building, I think, is like 2 FAR. And that could give you revenue, which you're not really looking at. So I'm assuming that it's not feasible, but in fact, if it's feasible, then you may want to actually look at an alternative where you're enlarging the building.
Okay.
Or if your engineer or architect could take a look at the building and see if that's possible.
Right, yeah, it would obviously be disruptive to the commercial uses, and the building may not be, it may require extraordinary engineering.
Right, just take a
costs and
look at
connections.
that,
We'll
but I
take a look.
think you need to put that issue
I understand.
as well. Okay, any speakers on this item? All
I'm
right.
sorry, Commissioner Montanez, I'm sorry,
Yes.
just mentioned the signage. I think I missed one of your comments. I want to make sure I got it.
Oh, to add the handicap entry?
That's it, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Most, we'll give you 3 weeks.
Okay,
So that's April 29th, and we'll continue the hearing on May 13th.
thank you.
Item number 23, calendar number 23313BZ, 2413 Avenue R, Brooklyn. Law Officer Frederick A. Becker.
Good morning, Lara J. Altman from the Law Office of Frederick A. Becker. We did attend your executive session yesterday and heard your comments. We are going to have the architect revise the plans. First of all, you are correct, they do not comply with Section 23451 regarding planting. That will be corrected. In addition, I don't know if your board noted, but we did notice that the building envelope, this building far exceeds as far as
Right.
the attic shape. We are aware of it. We've been working on it the last week or so. I anticipate we should have plans from the architect hopefully shortly, but we've been working on getting plans that are acceptable.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
And you're going to clarify the FAR. I think on the zoning analysis, I think it said .95, and I think in the statements it said 1.01.
It was originally 1.01 and had been revised down to 0.95.
Okay.
With this attic revision, we will make sure all of the documents are correct.
Okay, so if you can do that. Any speakers on this item? All right, no speakers. If you can submit in 2 weeks?
If we could have 3, this architect
That's
is
fine.
on the slower side.
That's fine. April 22nd, and April 22nd is actually 2 weeks, isn't it? So it should be April 29th and we'll have the hearing on May 13th.
Thank you.
Item number 24, calendar number 30213BZ, 140 West 23rd Street, Manhattan. Francis R. Angelino.
Good morning again, Commissioners.
Yes, we had a few questions, Commissioner Martinez.
Yes, I know you've described the noise attenuation measures you're going to take. Could you put some of the description and drawings on the plans?
Yes, we can. Essentially, we're building a box within a box to acoustical engineer specifications to contain, like a sound studio, all of the sound within the space.
All right, so if you can actually have your drawings reflect that, that was my comment as well.
We could have that. We have
And really
detailed-
explain what the attenuation is, because this, this is a particular case where you have your residential immediately above that, and as you know, we've had various PCEs where this has caused an issue, so if you
Yes.
can incorporate this box within box engineering into the drawings.
Yes.
Okay.
And the owner has been very diligent in meeting with a number of the people within the building, as well as with the head of the condo board, to make sure that anything that they require is done, as I expect you will hear shortly.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any speakers on this item? Yes, please come forward.
Please state your name for the record. You'll be given 3 minutes.
My name is Renato Robson, and I live right above the space. And I have a backyard, and they're installing massive AC and ventilation units, and they're attached to my wall. And I have a yard, I have plants, I have trees, and I'm very concerned about the heat and noise from the AC unit from this place. Also, spinning classes are known to be loud music, and I'm right above. And the classes, I believe, is from 6 to 11 in the evening. So that's my concern.
Are you, you're not within the subject building, you're adjacent to this building?
No, I'm right above.
Oh, right above?
Right above.
I see, okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may.
Yes.
Some points of clarification. When Mr. Robinson just spoke, he said he was right above. It's correct. I understand he is on the second floor, but he is not directly above the studio. Even if he was, he would still not hear any sound the way the studio is designed. Secondly, as to the AC units in the rear yard, this space had previously been a Dwayne Reade, and they had the same, a different system, but the same AC requirements for the exact same space that the Peloton studio is going into. So, in addition, the units are placed in common space. I have the bylaws of the condominium, and they mention on page 9 that the slope roof extending beyond and below the second floor tenants shall be commercial limited condominium element. Commercial unit owner, that's Peloton, shall have the right to mount and maintain mechanical equipment and/or a skylight on such roof for the exclusive benefit of the commercial unit. Again, on page 16, the commercial unit owner will have the right to mount mechanical equipment or skylights on the slope roof adjacent to the terraces of unit 2C and 2D. Again, on page 16, the commercial unit has the right to do that. So there's no question they have the right to do that. What wasn't mentioned is that the owner of the studio has met with the gentleman who just spoke and offered to do additional work. And I understand that there's going to be a meeting this afternoon. So it's an ongoing and continuous thing. And the owner has been very forthright in meeting with all of the people in the building and offering to do testing on sound on an ongoing basis. There's no activity in the studio now, so that it is a win-win situation for the people in the building.
All right, but the people within there's a meeting today, is that correct?
Yes.
Are you also meeting with them?
Just the unit owner that you just saw speak,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson, and the owner, John Foley, who is here today, who is the owner, the principal owner of Peloton Studio.
Okay. All right, I think it'd be helpful, at least in the record, if you can just maybe tell us what happened at the meeting and transpired, but
We
the
can do
issue
that.
is that you intend to monitor the noise within this space, is that correct?
Absolutely.
And work with the condominium board to make sure that there are no impacts?
Yes.
All right, and the PC is not functioning right now, correct? It's not illegal, is it?
It is in place, but it is not, it is not, the club is not in operation.
The club is not in operation, but you've already installed the box within the box?
Yes. If you want, I'll have the owner, John Foley, just in 1 minute,
Okay, sure.
describe it.
Over the 1 minute. John Foley.
It's okay.
Madam Chair, thanks for having me. So yes, I'm the principal of Peloton. I'm the good guy on the lease. This is my business. I've raised money. It is very important to me that this box within the box works. No one is going to be more upset if the people are complaining. So I've been we've been basically building this thing for a year. And as you know, spin studios can be loud. And it's been very important to me, to your point, the fact that there's residential tenants above us. So we've taken a belt and suspenders approach. I can walk you through. We spent $50,000. I guess this is in your.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. Okay, but
So it's a sophisticated system. I spent $50,000 getting an acoustic engineer to create this system, and then we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building it so that we have a acoustically isolated chamber so that we can run our operation and not disturb the tenants. Specific to the HVAC unit, we did meet with his architect. We're meeting with our architect this afternoon. On Peloton's dime, I've offered to build an acoustic isolation wall so that he doesn't hear the HVAC unit. We're trying to figure out what we can do. We have offered to do all kinds of stuff. Nothing seems to appease him. I think he's just upset that they're there when they weren't there. Clearly, when I rented the space, I checked the condo bylaws to make sure that we would have a place to put our HVAC unit. The owner and the condo board have told me that this is the place to put it. So, and it calls out specifically that it can be right behind his unit. So I understand why he's upset, but as the business person, I'm trying to figure out what I can do to navigate this properly.
right, is it? But I think as a part of this proposal, could you not make sure that you put some kind of insulation on the HVAC?
Absolutely.
And maybe you can reflect that in your drawings to us so that we have that as well.
Sure thing.
Because even if if there's this HVAC equipment, it may affect other units as well. So I think it's prudent to, regardless of whatever comes out of this meeting, that you anyway insulate this in some way and attenuate for any
Absolutely.
noise or vibration.
We're on good footing with the condo board, the president, and most of the unit holders. This is a specific situation with this one person, but you're right, we should try to make everybody happy, and that is, we have the money to do it, we have the will to do it, so it's just a matter of getting it done.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Yes.
Any other questions?
We can have a note put on the plans regarding the AC unit.
Right, if you could just sort of detail out, all the measures that you're planning to put in place, both for the HVAC and
Okay.
for containing PCE space overall in terms of both, it's basically sound and vibration. Are there any other concerns? Okay. Are there any more speakers? There are no more speakers, we can close the hearing, and we'll leave the record open. You can submit to us in 2 weeks.
2 weeks is fine.
April 22nd, we can set the decision date for May 6th.
Is it possible, earlier, I'm going to be out of the country from April 30th through May 13th, if it's possible to do it.
Can you submit to us in 1 week?
I can submit in 1 week.
Okay, so that's April 15th. We can vote this out on April 29th. Just before you
appreciate
go on
that. Thank
vacation. Make a motion to close.
Chair Srinivasan.
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Ali Brown.
Thank you.
Item number 25, calendar number 30513BZ, 30-50 Whitestone Expressway, Queens, Anchorman Centerfit.
Good morning, Sarah Farhadian with Ackerman LLP on behalf of the applicant. As you know, the applicant is requesting a special permit for a physical culture establishment. I had the opportunity to attend the executive review session yesterday, and I'd like to begin by addressing your questions. With respect to the delay in filing this application, unfortunately, a dispute arose between the landlord and the tenant regarding who was responsible for obtaining the special permit. Ultimately, the landlord assumed responsibility and retained our firm to apply for the special permit from your board. With respect to the handicap access to the second floor, please be advised that there is handicap access through the main elevators in the building. Lastly, I think you were asking about the violations against the building. DOB has indicated that it will work with us to clear those violations, but it wants us to obtain the special permit for the PCE before they'll continue to work with us to clear those violations. And also in that regard, I have a letter from the architect that I'd like to submit that outlines the violations and how they're going to remedy them.
Okay.
I don't know if you have any other questions.
Commissioner Montanez, you had, on the ADA issue?
Yes, some of them had to do with signage related to the PCE.
It's my understanding that DOB is really stressing that we please obtain this permit before they continue working with us on those other violations. And we intend to do everything possible if and when the special permit is issued to remedy those other violations and bring the building into full compliance.
Okay, I guess, where the elevators are, you have it crosshatched saying this space is not part of the application, so maybe you can indicate somehow how there's access to the second floor.
Absolutely, I can provide you with that.
Any other questions? Any speakers on this item? Any speakers? All right, we can close the hearing. We'll leave the record open for you to modify your drawings.
Thank you.
You can submit to us on April 22nd. We can vote this out on May 6th.
I don't think it'll take us very long. I don't know if it's possible to come back sooner.
Let's keep the schedule.
Okay, no problem. The 22nd, I'm sorry. Is that? Okay, thank you.
Motion to close.
Chair Srinivas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson.
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez.
Aye.
Commissioner Arlie Brown.
All right. Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
And this, I guess you want this, Rory? This is Rory, you want these? Do you want these? I don't know what to do with them. I guess. This is another PC.
Okay, returning call, we're back on the calendar. Continued hearing items, item number 19, 289-13BZ, 473-541 6th Street, and also item number 10, 14292BZ, 473-541 6th Street, Brooklyn.
Yes.
Good. I guess it's noon, so I don't know whether to say good morning or good afternoon. Elise Wagner from Kramer, Levin, Naftalis, and Frankel for the applicant, New York Methodist Hospital. As you know, the hospital is requesting a variance and an amendment of a prior special permit to facilitate the development of a new ambulatory care center to be known as the Center for Community Health on the hospital's campus in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Following the board's public hearing on February 11th, the hospital submitted updated materials on March 4th. Those materials included, among other things, a study of lesser variance alternatives, a garage overbuild study, and streetscape images showing the proposed center in context. We also informed the board by letter late last week that the hospital will make modifications to the building's design to address concerns raised by this board and by the community board regarding the massing of the building, particularly in the contextual zoning districts. Our presentation today will describe these proposed modifications in greater detail and will respond to several of the questions raised by the board at its review session yesterday regarding traffic and construction staging. We understand that Preserve Park Slope intends to make a presentation regarding its proposal to build over the garage. The hospital's architects and consultants have studied this option carefully, and as they will describe later, they have determined that the build over garage option would have most of the same infirmities as the complying development that we have described and would require approximately the same extent of waivers as the proposed center. Our presenters today will include Lauren Yedvab, Senior Vice President at New York Methodist, Brian Richard of Philip Habib and Associates Traffic Consultants, and Chuck Richmond of Lend Lease Construction Managers. After Preserve Park Slope has made its presentation, with the chair's permission, the hospital's experts would like to respond, and those will be Michael Kortler, our zoning consultant, and Frank Gunther of Perkins Eastman Architects. I just note we are again joined by Lynn Hill, Vice President for Communication and External Affairs at Methodist, Paul Travis of Washington Square Partners, and Stephen Holly of AKRF, and they will be available to answer any questions the board may have. Lauren?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Lauren Yedvab. I am the Senior Vice President at New York Methodist Hospital. The hospital has given serious consideration to both the comments made by the board at the public hearing last month and the conditions set forth by the community board's resolution with respect to the height and setback of the building along 5th Street. In response to these comments, the hospital has decided to make 3 design modifications to reduce the presence of the building on 5th Street. These modifications create some programmatic changes, but our architects have determined that they are feasible. The modifications are as follows. In the R6B district, the building setback at the 4th floor will be increased by an additional 15 feet to a total depth of 20 feet from the property line. Also, in the R6B district, the building setback at the 5th, 6th, and 7th floors will be increased by an additional 10 feet from the currently proposed setback distance to a total depth of 41 feet from the property line. In the R7B district, the building setback at the 6th floor will be increased by 21 feet so that no portion of the 6th floor is located in the R7B district. With this modification, the building will fully comply with the applicable height and setback regulations in the R7B district. We're going to go to the aerial view. This aerial view compares the March 4th submission with our proposed reduction. These modifications result in a building that is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and the following slides will show rendering views of our proposed reductions. The first slide shows a view coming down 8th Avenue. The next slide is a closer view from 8th Avenue and 6th Street. The next view is of 8th Avenue from 5th Street. And the last is a view from 7th Avenue looking up 5th Street. We are working with Perkins Eastman to finalize the proposed program for this modified building. We expect to submit revised versions of the proposed plans and other application materials to the board within the next 2 weeks. With respect to traffic management, I would like to note that the hospital is aware of existing traffic management issues on the streets surrounding the hospital. We have instituted a program whereby the hospital staff monitors the streets surrounding the hospital and encourages double-parked cars to move along. The hospital is also working with Councilmember Brad Lander's Traffic Task Force and expects that the task force will recommend further traffic management measures that the hospital will undertake. In fact, the hospital is already working to implement some of the measures recommended by some of the members of the task force. We have also met with all of the principals of the schools housed in the John Jay Educational Campus to discuss the Center for Community Health and how the construction will affect the surrounding streets. We agreed to meet with them periodically as the construction progresses. At this time, I would like to introduce Brian Richard from Philip Habib and Associates, who will now discuss the traffic impact of the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Richard from Philip Habib and Associates. I conducted the transportation. I did the transportation attachment in the EIS, and in that study we compared the complying development with the proposed development. Since the complying development it was of comparable size as the proposed development, the increase in travel demand was negligible. So under seeker guidelines, it did not warrant a detailed analysis of the intersections or transit or pedestrian facilities in the area. However, New York Methodist asked us to do another due diligence study where we analyzed existing conditions in the area and compared it to the proposed development. One of the interesting things about the travel demand for this building is that 54% of the total travel demand for the proposed building actually already exists in the building across the street. So therefore, the actual increase in travel demand to the area with the proposed development is actually only 46% of the entire building. And since patient visits are scheduled pretty uniformly across the entire day, the actual increase in vehicles or pedestrian trips is relatively low over the course of the entire day. The study that I conducted found that based on seeker criteria, no impacts would be created in any of the 6 intersections that we looked at in the study area, which included 7th Avenue and 5th Street across from John Jay. Some of the design elements of the building were sympathetic to the traffic in the area and to the community, and they include the on-street drop-off area, on-site drop-off area, which has access only off of 6th Street. This keeps a majority of all the patient drop-offs and patient visits to 6th Street and not onto 5th Street. And another element of this on-site drop-off is that patients that currently drop off on 6th Street and 7th Avenue would now be moved to onto this on-site drop-off area. This would improve the quality of flow that exists on 6th Street and 7th Avenue. The proposed garage would include 350 parking spaces. Now, since the proposed development is building on top of an existing lot, the actual net increase in parking spaces to New York Methodist campus is actually only 233 spaces. And as I said before, the patient demand is pretty uniform across the entire day, so the parking demand is relatively light. It's only about 104 spaces at its peak, so there would be approximately 100 spaces left over for Methodist to decide whatever they wish to do with them. Finally, the other design element of the building is the 5th Street loading dock, which is over the existing parking deck. It's an internal loading dock with head-in, head-out operations, so that a truck coming down 5th Street can drive into the loading dock and then do all of its maneuvering on-site and then drive out, unlike the 7th Avenue loading dock where the maneuvering happens on the street.
As per your analysis, how many trucks do you anticipate would be coming to this loading dock?
It's approximately 30 trucks daily with 3 in the peak hour, at most 3.
Okay.
And when I say truck, I mean, it's not your tractor trailer, it's your small truck, it's your van. 30 deliveries, I'm sorry, I should really say.
Okay, 30 deliveries. Yes, Commissioner.
And that's comparable to what is currently happening, or is it an increase? I wasn't clear. The amount of trucks.
It would be
Additional.
46%. I'm sorry. No, it would be additional.
So it's 30 additional trucks, not, okay.
Yes.
It wasn't clear whether you meant it's 30 total or 30 additional.
I apologize.
Right, but right now, is there any truck traffic on Fifth Street?
I don't believe so, but there is, it's for local deliveries.
Right, local
Yeah.
deliveries, okay. All right, and just the garage, the existing garage,
Yes.
which is under the special permit,
Mhm.
that'll continue to function as it functions today with its access? Is that access from Fifth Street as well?
Right now, there is no access off of Fifth Street, but with the proposed development, they will go back to their permitted access off of Fifth Street for the original special permit.
Okay, because it's blocked off or something, is that correct?
Yes.
Which is a temporary measure, is that?
Yes.
Okay, but the special permit allowed access from Fifth
It
Street?
allowed for access during peak hours, which when the proposed development is built, the gate will be open only during the peak hours, which is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
For the garage?
For the
is that
garage,
correct?
yes.
And, but otherwise, so that's during peak hours, Fifth Street entrance is open, but otherwise for the
It would be
remaining
closed,
portion, it's all from Sixth Street, is that
Yes, it would
correct?
all be off of Sixth Street, yes. And the new garage for the proposed
It's all
development
from Sixth Street?
is off of Sixth Street and will also be connected to the existing garage as well below.
Okay. And one other issue or question is that, just to clarify, there are no ambulances that are
No.
coming to the site, right? Coming to the new facility?
No, it's all ambulatory care. It's all
Right.
elective surgery. There's no ambulances that are going to be coming to this building.
Okay. All right, yeah, I interrupted your presentation. I don't know if
I was going to talk about the ambulances, and that was it.
Okay. All right, any questions for now? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Chuck Richmond. I'm a Director of Operations for Lend Lease, the construction manager for the project. We have been working with the Methodist team since the project began, so we've been involved for a while. We understand the challenges of building a project of this type in this neighborhood. We take it very seriously. Planning is our most important goal on any of our projects. To highlight a couple of the challenges we focused on, first and foremost is safety, is building a project that is completely contained. The construction activities are separated from the public and the property. The neighboring properties are protected. We have focused the logistics to be mainly on 6th Street. Can you hear me?
If you could take the mic with you when you go up to the board, because you lose some volume.
So we looked at the logistics to mainly occur on 6th Street. We are going to have trucks come down 6th Street. Our hoists would be on 6th Street. Men, material workers would come in and out from 6th Street. This will eliminate the need to have loading and unloading on 5th Street or 8th Avenue. So trucks will come down and keep going that way. So there'll be no construction traffic on 5th and almost nothing on 8th Avenue with that plan. We have forecasted the construction schedule will be approximately 36 months, 6 months for demolition and 30 months for the new construction. We have looked into specialized equipment to help minimize noise pollution, air pollution. We'll be working closely with New York Methodist and interacting with the community. We will have a liaison that will help plan any activities that affect the neighborhood, as well as address any of your concerns. So I think that's it for this part of the presentation.
Commissioner Martinez, I know you had some concerns.
Yeah, I know that 6th Street is currently used to deliver patients. It's for ambulances. It's a narrow street. How do you intend to have all this, the trucks, all the truck deliveries, any excavation equipment? It's all, everything is coming down 6th Street. It just seems like a very small space to put everything.
It is, but the entire site will be contained in a construction fence. We will need to eliminate the parking on the north side of 6th Street. So trucks will come in and take that parking lane and not take the active through lane. So they'll come into a fence and then leave out through the fence. So we won't be unloading, we won't be double parking, unloading material from the middle of the road, blocking traffic. The truck has to pull it into the site and leave the same way.
And I understand it's mandatory that no construction workers will be parking in the neighborhood?
That's correct.
And you're going to find off-site parking?
We are, we've
You're
looked
going
at
to have buses bring them?
shuttling and off-site storage possibly in downtown. That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Wagner, do you have any other speakers?
That is the end of our presentation, but we would certainly like to respond after the Serve Park Slope presentation. Thank you.
That seems fine. All right, Mr. Klein?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Stuart Klein, and I'm here representing Preserve Park Slope. My comments will be brief because we have a rather extensive a submission, a presentation. I would start by saying I'm rather surprised that the special permit component of this is on for today's calendar. I was unaware of that. We didn't have a chance to review it or to comment on it, and I think we should be given that additional time. The other thing I'd like to comment on is that we recently received partial plans last week, no elevations, no cross-sections, and much of the floors were missing from the presentation, which arguably were done, in the words of the applicant, in response to the community board's questions and this board's questions. However, I would note that this was done 2 months, or rather almost a full month after their previous submission, and nearly 2 months after the public hearing. So I don't understand why there was this sudden epiphany on the very eve of this hearing where new plans had to suddenly be submitted in response to various and sundry statements which were made months ago. So I think we should have the opportunity to review those new plans when and if they do come in and comment on them accordingly at the next hearing. With regard to the safety at the site, I don't know what Bovis is speaking about with regard to its speaking to the community. Nobody's spoken to the community. I have a rather cynical view of them. Hopefully they'll do a better job here than they did at Deutsche Bank. The question I have, which was not addressed at yesterday's hearing and doesn't seem to be addressed with any of the submissions by the applicant, and in fact they seem to have turned a dead eye to them, to the issue is whether or not this is truly a Cornell case. Cornell did not cover hospitals. It did not cover anything outside of schools and religious institutions. And therefore, under the precedent of this zoning board, Court of Appeals, in the Cornell case, in the accompanying case, Sarah Lawrence, is required to ask them to detail their programmatic needs. What we have here is a bunch of programmatic wishes and not needs. I fail to see how this 300,000 square foot building is going to be an educational institution. It doesn't fit within the definition of education institution that's been established repeatedly by the courts of New York. Certainly the 80,000 plus square feet of new medical space for private doctors to come in and become part of their billing protocols is certainly not, doesn't have anything whatsoever to do with teaching. And the final thing I'd like to comment on, and I'm most disturbed by this, is I've reviewed each and every one of the applications that was submitted by hospitals, all of which were in Manhattan and were reviewed by the board. And in each of those cases, the board demanded and received additional information with regard to the teaching aspect of the facility. It also demanded and received quantification, which the court requires, of the hardships. It also demanded and received studies that were done, demographic studies and need studies that were done by the hospital. For whatever reason, I don't know why, for whatever reason, the board has not required that in this particular circumstance. Why it has decided to step away from the very requirements you made for every single hospital in Manhattan, Presbyterian, Weill Cornell, NYU Langone, and Sloan Kettering, particularly the 1133 York Avenue site, is very disturbing to me. And I just don't see how this presentation meets any of the requirements and any standards you set forth, this board set forth, in any of the prior applications. Thank you.
Thank you. You have speakers, correct? Yes. All right.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bennett Kleinberg. I'm a grateful patient of New York Methodist, a strong supporter of their mission, and a neighbor on 5th Street. I'm also the president of Preserve Park Slope, an organization comprised of hundreds of neighbors that share the hospital's desire to enhance healthcare services and remain financially viable while also respecting the unique character of the Park Slope neighborhood. The hospital's architects at Perkins Eastman have suggested that this U-shaped configuration of the proposed ambulatory care center is the only way the hospital's programmatic needs can be met. Most relevant to this body, they are here making the argument that their plan, their U-shaped plan, requires the minimum necessary variance to achieve their program. However, a careful review and analysis conducted by a team of professional architects, urban designers, historic preservationists, and zoning experts shows that other solutions exist for this site. We will demonstrate that there are alternatives to Perkins Eastman's design and that would meet the hospital's claimed programmatic needs, require far fewer variances, and be far more contextually appropriate for the surrounding Park Slope Historic District. This is not to say that we believe the scale proposed by Methodist is necessary, but rather it means that Methodist has not come close to seeking the minimum variance necessary. For instance, based on the hospital's own structural engineer's letter from Severin and Associates and their testimony in front of this board, it's clear that Methodist can build a portion of their project on the garage location without creating any hardship to their operations or altering their design concept. To illustrate this, we're going to present a series of conceptual drawings which illustrate how such a building might look were New York Methodist to construct just 5 floors on the existing garage site and request a small rear yard variance for that site. Recognizing that hospital design demands specialized expertise, we consulted with several hospital architects and certified medical planners to ensure that modern and generally accepted design concepts were being adhered to in a structure that utilized the garage site. For the purposes of our presentation, we will refer to this alternative approach as the garage build. This alternative garage build scheme provides the following. It allows for the large 95-foot floor plates that Methodist says are required to meet their programmatic need. It reduces the entire bulk of the building and allows the entire operating and recovery suite to be located on 1 floor, not 2, thereby reducing the need for variances. The result is a building significantly reduced in height across the R6, R6B, and R7B zones simply by a shift onto the garage wing. This disperses the FAR and brings the entire complex more closely in line with the essential character of the neighborhood. Methodist has presented to the board a flawed proposal with a false choice, a complying plan with 2 unconnected buildings that create all kinds of operational difficulties, and their proposed one that supposedly meets all of their needs. However, as we will show, there is a compelling alternative where the area above the garage is fully used, the 2 previously unconnected buildings are connected, and programs are logically placed. Since this alternative is clearly doable, the plan presented by Methodist to the board is not the minimum variance necessary, and the board has no basis on which to grant the variance. The application should therefore be denied. David Hirsch, an esteemed architect with multiple degrees from Harvard and Cooper Union, will now show how fully using the garage space, a building of lesser scale that includes the claimed programmatic needs and requiring much less of a variance, can be created. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. My name is David Hirsch. I represent the architects and urban design team that have been developing the alternate garage approach. We're not pretending to be the hospital's architects. We're simply showing a concept that would allow a lesser variance by using the 5-story potential of the existing garage. As Bennett indicated, this approach demonstrates that the hospital is not asking for the minimum variance necessary. And as a primary example of this, we illustrate the advantage of the most critical floor, the OR suite, including OR and PACU and that facility. It's shown on this drawing. Unfortunately, the lights are interfering. Is it possible? I'll use the diagram.
Okay, and it seems like there's a handout as well. Good.
They can follow along with the, yeah, see, it still doesn't, probably. Can you read?
Yeah, yes, I'm fine. Before we discuss what you see on the slide, we need to address Perkins Eastman's claim that a 95-foot wide floor plate could not be accommodated on the existing garage. First, let's look at the zoning. A minimal zoning variance will allow the 90-foot floor plate. Our zoning expert, Joe Trivisono, has letter, which we've submitted, states that a variance for an exception only to the rear yard equivalent would allow this essential dimension, and there are no other variants required to achieve this. Just want to point out, take this with me, that we're talking about the area of the extension over the garage, and that you're looking at exactly the same plan as in the Perkins Eastman study. Also, a 60-foot courtyard between the existing building and the new wing is also not required as stated by Perkins Eastman. The remaining 45 feet of open space between the garage build and Wesley House is an adequate open area to satisfy the residential requirements for light and air. That's to the Wesley House, which is a residential building. There are no other zoning issues in the garage build R6 zone. Second, it is clear that the existing garage was built for and can support a 5-story structure. We just mentioned this. A bulb will be less expensive to build, of course, because the foundations are in place. The severed letter provided by Perkins Eastman clearly states that 5-story structure can be built upon the garage without any retrofit or major structural alterations. The first floor, as shown in the Perkins Eastman plan, which is a very tall floor, will allow all of the structure, the accommodating transfer beams, and the structure allowing for a hospital operating floor that has no vibrations, all within the first floor ceiling. Third, by redesigning and relocating some of the mechanical ducts and relocating the egress stair, the garage would effectively be directly accessible to all functions adjacent to it on all floors, the same as shown here on the critical OR floor. We note how these elements have been moved to the garage. I'll just point to them. The ducts and the circulation. There's an open area here between surgery and the PACU, and they will function very, very well in plan, much better than in the Perkins-Eastman scheme. So as you can see, the most significant floor is the OR. As they've stated from the beginning, that's what established the floor plate. The operating unit and the PACU after it, shown with exactly the same location as the suite in the Perkins-Eastman proposal. With their stated floor plan dimensions, this clearly indicates that once the minor variance to the rear yard equivalent is granted for the garage build, this critical facility can be reoriented over the garage. Security and sterility in that facility will be maintained. It will be a vastly improved circulation system. How could the separation of the OR and PACU be more efficient? Next slide. This next schematic, which shows exactly how the hospital could be, how the center could be rearranged. Methodist claims that building over the garage would not satisfy the center's programmatic needs because it would be functionally and operationally segregated from the rest of the facility. We've just demonstrated that the OR can be integrated with its own related facilities, the PACU. This is true of the entire new construction. Each floor will have immediate access from the garage to whatever is adjacent to it. It can be designed as one thing. Reference is made to the garage build approach as being deficient as the complying development. That's incorrect, since the garage build incorporates the same elevator cores as the Perkins-Eastman scheme, and both elevators floors connect to both buildings. By integrating the area over the garage, we have improved the circulation to the entire facility. This is particularly true, of course, on the operating floor, which we've demonstrated. Circulation through this area from the eastern core to the western core can be separate from the sterile OR suite. Again, pointing at the drawing. This is the western elevator core. This is the western elevator core. This is the eastern elevator core. It would be so simple for this core, if it went all the way to the ground, which it does not in the Perkins-Eastman scheme, to provide access to all of the hospital staff, the doctors, directly to all of those facilities which they are mainly directing towards. And it would be, just as in the Perkins and Eastman scheme, easy for all visitors, all patients to maintain access through the east. This is something that really I think that it's missing entirely from their thinking on how to design this facility. When this integrated scheme, numerous functions could be relocated, some to the new garage building wings, such as materials maintenance, building services adjacent to the loading dock. Those are two facilities that have no relation to operations of the rest of the medical facilities. Locker rooms, laboratories, sterile supply, cancer center, women's center, special operations procedure, all could be located to the western core. That's what we're showing in the diagram. All of these served very effectively by the western elevator core, while the remaining clinical institutes are on the east and accessible from the eastern elevator core. We note that the original Perkins-Eastman plan includes approximately 70 to 80,000 square feet for these institutes. The garage builds incorporates that size and that number. The top two floors of this scheme just presented will be all of the other facilities, reducing the building. Once you do build this much, you will have reduced the buildings by 2 complete floors, reducing it by approximately 45 to 50 feet in height. So The benefits, final one. The benefits, to sum up, providing required large 95-foot floor plate to meet NYM's stated program could be achieved. Better use of the full site potential using the FAR of the garage. A substantial amount of the building's height would be reduced overall and across the R6, R6B, and R7B zones and shifted onto the garage wing. A significantly lesser variance would be necessary to construct the garage build. So it is better contextually and more in line with the character of the neighborhood. You're looking at what is removed from the top of this facility. All of what is red will then be shifted onto the garage end of the building, and it will function just as well as Perkins Eastman thinks their scheme will. The garage approach clearly demonstrates that Methodist application does not seek the minimum variance necessary. This comparison demonstrates a reduction in the bulk between NYM's current design and the garage build approach. We hope this makes our point clear.
Thank you. All right, I believe the team has a few additional speakers. Is that correct?
20 minutes. Actually made it. Put the lights.
Each person will be given 3 minutes, yes. Please go ahead.
Yeah, please state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is David Abramson, based on over 40 years of professional architectural practice, working within historic districts and with old buildings. I will provide testimony regarding shortcomings of the design for the proposed Center for Community Health, based on my review of materials submitted by the hospital in support of its variance request, including the BSA application and environmental assessment statement. I request that the variance be denied for these reasons. Most significantly, the design of the proposed building alters the essential character of the neighborhood, and this is inconsistent with criteria for granting a variance. The proposed design doesn't satisfy the commitment made by Methodist Hospital in the memorandum of agreement dated September 15, 2009, between the hospital and Park Slope Civic Council to endeavor to make every effort to preserve and add to the sense of place as defined by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Park Slope's buildings evidence a range of features which establish both an overall cohesiveness as well as individual distinctiveness. While I recognize the architect's attempt to glancingly allude to some of these features, the proposed building design and size would alter the essential character of the neighborhood. What are the features of the existing neighborhood character that the proposed design does not respect? First and foremost, Park Slope's building fronts, almost without exception, have setbacks of varying distances from the property lines. This includes single-family row houses, apartment buildings, religious structures, and even the hospital's older 8th Avenue East Pavilion. Methodist's proposed building destroys the setback by building to the property lines on 8th Avenue and 6th Street. Their building lacks the iconic green spaces provided by front wall setbacks, which allow space for tree roots and greenery to spread. Second, Park Slope's sense of place is characterized by an array of scale-creating features, which break down the mass of each building to a more individual scale, which are lacking in the proposed building. These include window surrounds and sills, brick patterns, well-defined first-floor entrances, color variations in the facade, which also playfully move back and forth to the pedestrian eye, and relationships between the solids of the walls and the voids of the windows and doors. Methodist's proposed 4-story glass window wall at the 8th Avenue building entrance has an unfamiliar height, planar character, and scale, and would stand out as a highly illuminated commercial beacon simply without precedent. The proposed building's first-floor windows create a relentless procession of institutional, storefront-like windows which are devoid of characteristic articulation of materials and detail, which primarily would provide views along 8th Avenue into a corridor. My final point recalls that the approval process for the recently built 7th Avenue Methodist Medical Pavilion mandated a New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission review, which was built into the BSA approval for the pavilion. The historic character of the neighborhood, amply chronicled in the hospital's environmental assessment statement and application, begs for careful consideration of the LPC, and I strongly urge a required Landmarks Preservation Commission review as part of your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker?
Hello, my name is Beth Morrow, and I've lived next to Methodist for 16 years, and I'm here to ask the board to impose concrete, meaningful conditions on any approval of a variance by requiring the hospital to adhere to a traffic mitigation plan that is developed with the involvement from the DOT, surrounding schools, and the community. It's appropriate to consider traffic issues because increased gridlock, pollution, and resulting traffic concerns, safety concerns would alter the essential character of our neighborhood. This issue is of heightened importance because the hospital has not acknowledged a responsibility to mitigate the impact of their anticipated new traffic, and because they have failed to successfully manage their current traffic. And I present slides as a visual framework for understanding our concerns. There is an upper limit to the amount of hospital program that this neighborhood can absorb, and we believe that we have already reached that limit. These narrow streets were built before cars and trucks, and they are not getting wider. There are no major arteries leading to and from the hospital to alleviate the impact of a major increase in cars, trucks, taxis, car service cars, ambulances, and ambulances. In this picture, behind the red truck is an ambulance stuck behind traffic with an emergency patient in the back, lights and siren on, right in front of my house. This happens daily. This is dangerous, and as I've noted before, what is bad for neighbors is bad for the hospital and its patients. Making the tight situation worse, the existing ambulance dock is unable to handle current ambulance traffic, and here you see ambulances backed up on 7th Street and a patient being unloaded in the street, which are both common occurrences. And yet, as the hospital puts forward plans to invest unknown millions of dollars, it doesn't appear to be addressing this big problem. Again, next slide. The tight situation is made more dangerous by the design of the 7th Avenue truck loading dock, where trucks cross the busy sidewalk, usually backing up, as you can see here. And again, the hospital is not investing to address this problem, though further growth of the hospital threatens to make things worse, even if they build this new internal dock. Next slide. Here you see students passing the 7th Avenue loading dock. There are nearly 5,000 students attending schools within a few blocks of the proposed facility, where the hospital's expansion will add 100,000 cars at least and 6,500 trucks each year, not including construction vehicles. And at the last hearing, you asked the hospital to outline plans for addressing safety concerns regarding students. In response, the hospital deflects responsibility and says it will have basically no impact at 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., and that Brad Lander's task force can address it. Though Lander's task force meets infrequently and has never discussed student safety. That is inadequate and provides a good example of why we neighbors are worried. In sum, any expansion of the hospital must hold them accountable and be conditioned on effective traffic mitigation strategies.
Thank you. The next speaker?
Good morning, all. My name is Norman Mintz. I'm a professional urban designer and historic preservationist and live within close proximity of the hospital. Okay. What happens when you have to deal with tens of thousands of additional vehicles in a neighborhood with narrow streets like this? The result is chaotic. So the question becomes, are we to expect even more of a traffic problem? Presuming the hospital's figures are accurate, at the outset, the new building will easily generate over 100,000 new passenger vehicles annually, on top of the current number of vehicles using the already clogged streets. These numbers can be expected to grow 5, 10, and 20 years out. Even without the new facility, traffic at Methodist is rising exponentially. Importantly, these numbers do not account for the magnified impact of a single car where drivers circle the neighborhood to find parking, amplifying the impact of each car. In addition, ambulances and cough services hover endlessly around the hospital with engines on, whether they be circling the hospital, idling, while they wait. So what can be done? The community would like to propose some mitigation measures. First, significantly reduce the size and scale of the expansion. Second, the BSA should require that adequate planning is done. When Philip Habib did his study, The hospital did not yet present a complete program, so his findings were based upon insufficient information. In addition, one must realize that the Habib study was commissioned by the hospital. What is needed is a new independent traffic study based upon adequate and timely information. Planning needs to involve relevant city agencies to ensure that it is done properly. And any new study needs to include genuine input from the community and neighboring schools. Third, the board should attach meaningful preconditions to any approval that holds the hospital accountable. This includes mitigating their traffic impact in the future as well as in the present. It is a known fact to those, like myself, who live near the hospital, that New York Methodist is solely negligent in enforcing or monitoring by their own staff any of the posted regulations, including no standing signs that are adjacent to their own property. In conclusion, furthermore, the hospital's inability to manage its current impact highlights the need for significant oversight by any expansion that is approved. In conclusion, the nearly 500,000 square foot facility that the hospital proposes will generate traffic that detracts and overwhelms the essential character of the surrounding historic residential neighborhood and places thousands of school children at risk. As such, we ask the board to impose meaningful conditions on any approval of a variance, including requiring the hospital to adhere to a traffic mitigation plan that is developed with involvement from the DOT, surrounding schools, and the community, realizing, of course, that the best and most logical way to achieve the result is to reduce the size and scale of the proposed facility.
Mr.
And finally,
Minister, time is up.
the New York Metro must play a significant role in keeping in mind that they are still, the hospital is part of the treasure neighborhood, but that we call this neighborhood our home. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. The next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Gary Schaefer, S-H-A-F-F-E-R. I appeared before the board at the February hearing. I'm a lawyer, longtime Park Slope resident, and was the Assistant Commissioner for Regulatory Policy and Enforcement at the Department of Buildings from 2007 to 2010. When I was last here, I think it's interesting that Methodist started out today, and really their exclusive presentation so far has to do with traffic and parking issues. What I focused on last time was the table G1 that they submitted and that they have resubmitted now in exactly the same form with exactly the same numbers and with the exact same lack of support, despite the fact that the board asked for the support the last time they were here. Now, I'll just go very quickly through what table G1. It's the summary of affected outpatient facilities, and on the far right-hand corner, it shows the increment over 2,000 existing the increment over 2013 existing visits, and that's where you get the number, supposedly, at the bottom that says there'll be an increase of 102,245 annual visits. And this includes things like 2,394 additional visits to phlebotomy, 9,154 visits for radiation oncology, 2,652 visits to orthopedics faculty practice. Where do these numbers come from? You can't tell because, once again, the source at the bottom is listed as New York Methodist Hospital. If you compare, if these numbers are wrong, and there's no way to tell whether they're right or wrong, well, let's suppose these numbers are off by a factor of 10. That, in fact, the real numbers are 1/10 these numbers, and in fact, there'll only be 10,000 annual visits. Well, that would certainly change the nature of any building that was allegedly needed and change any parking analysis and air quality analysis. Let's assume, in fact, the real number is 5 times the amount here. Well, that too would change the parking analysis and air quality analysis. However, there's no way to know where these numbers come from. And when I spoke to Mr. Habib's associate who spoke here 20 minutes ago, he told me that in making their projections, they get their numbers from Methodist Hospital. They don't question where they come from. If you look at the other tables that Methodist submits as part of their EAS, they cite the source. You can find out where they get the decibel levels for amplified rock music, because under the sources there it cites 2 textbooks on acoustics as to where those are from. They cite nothing as to where the numbers of anticipated new visits come from. As such, there's no basis whatsoever for the board to make a determination as to whether the air quality study done and submitted is correct, or whether the parking study done or traffic study done has any basis or correct, or whether in fact the building they are seeking, in fact, or the variance they are seeking, seeks the minimum variance necessary, because they have not submitted anything to support the numbers they have given to the board. They have not submitted any numbers and any background for their programmatic needs. All they have shown is physically where those programmatic needs will be located in the building they want to build with a variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The next speaker. Yes, please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Eve Gartner. Commissioners, even if this is a Cornell case, I would ask the BSA to be aware of the distinction between the analysis required to comply with seeker and the analysis required to be eligible for the rebuttable Cornell presumption. In Cornell, the Court of Appeals said that the controlling consideration for the presumption must always be the overall impact on the public's welfare. There's a presumption that this educational institution, if in fact it is an educational institution, will have a beneficial impact on the community. But Methodist hasn't given you the information that you need to determine whether the impact of this will be beneficial or deleterious, and thus whether it's eligible for the Cornell presumption. Methodist has failed to quantify or analyze the impacts of the increased emissions of carbon monoxide and particulate matter. They say these are not of concern, but since these are both toxic elements that are emitted from the burning of fossil fuels and from vehicles, they might not be of concern to Methodists, but they're of concern to the community, and they're of concern to the parents whose kids go to the schools next door. So with respect to carbon monoxide, they don't do a quantified assessment because on page H2 of the EAS, they say that this facility is not expected to significantly alter the traffic conditions. Now, we've heard a lot about this, but I have a basic question, which is, if there's not going to be a lot of traffic coming here, why do they need 300,000 square feet of program? Today, they said, well, 54% of the traffic that's coming already comes. It just goes to other buildings that are part of the hospital's facility. But and if that's right, and it appears to be that they're shifting services from one hospital building to another hospital building, clearly that's going to empty space in the existing buildings, and eventually those spaces will be filled with services, and more patients will come to fill those services. So this really is a displacement. They're claiming there's not a lot of new traffic here. That's because they're shifting services, but they're not taking account in their traffic analysis the new patients that are coming to fill their existing buildings. So this is a problem. With respect to particulate matter, there's an even more obvious problem. On page H4 of the EAS, they say that an assessment of particulate matter isn't warranted because that pollutant is mostly associated with trucks, and especially diesel. And they make the preposterous assertion on page H4 that this development won't increase truck traffic. But today, they told us that there'll be 30 trucks a day coming to this new facility, to the loading dock. So I don't understand that at all. And in addition to that, there's obviously going to be significant truck traffic associated with the demolition and the construction. There's 16 buildings being demolished. The debris is going to be going to be carted off for years. They say there are 23 trucks a day during the peak demolition period. The final point is that this commission should not grant a variance based on a vague condition of some future mitigation. It should require specific mitigation before any variances are granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diana Gratis. I live on 6th Street near Methodist Hospital. I have actually been a volunteer at Methodist Hospital for about 11 years. My dog and I were instrumental in starting the therapy dog program there. That said, I'm very concerned about the expansion of the hospital. I'm in agreement with all the concerns that were expressed. To voice some of my thoughts, I've decided to write and read a poem. And I shall begin. The years I've lived in Park Slope add up to 42, during which time I've seen the neighborhood renew. Life in the slope has brought so many joys. It's been a wonderful place to raise our girls and boys. But alas, a threat has insidiously grown to all slopers, whether we lease or own. Methodist Hospital has formulated plans to expand, but in a way that deserves reprimand. It's on a scale that's not really fair, way too big and tall for the neighborhood to bear. We slopers treasure our quality of life, but with problems, this project will be rife. Massive size, shadows, traffic, and pollution. Surely there's a better solution. So please, Methodist, be a better neighbor. We will help you with your labor to come up with a plan that benefits us all, with a new building that's not so tall, that serves both your and the community's need. Our valid concerns you must heed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, staff, my name is Dr. Marvin Saporin. I've lived in Park Slope for 41 years, and in 2 months, my grandchild will be born at New York Methodist. So I wanted to be a successful and excellent hospital. Unfortunately, their plans are not about providing excellent health care in Brooklyn. It's about maximizing their profit. And unfortunately, they've not refrained from giving partial and misinformation throughout their defense of this indefensible project. Even today, when they spoke to you about the trucks coming to 6th Street and talking about them unloading within a construction zone, it's as if the trucks would appear by magic. How do they get to 6th Street in the first place? A street that's so narrow that when the hospital had to do some more construction on its existing building, they couldn't create the required pedestrian walkway and had to shut an entire sidewalk. Where are the trucks going to go when they exit the construction? They talk about from day one that construction workers would not be parking on the site, but in almost a year, they've still not found a place for the off-site parking. They keep referring to the Bradlander Task Force as their answer to traffic mitigation. I'm a member of that task force. The task force has not met in 4.5 months, and the only thing that the hospital has done in response to those meetings is further reduce the size of their garage, which will save them money, give them more space, excuse me, but which they're not reallocating to lowering the height of the building. Stuart Klein was right in terms of saying that what Methodist is going to do with the new ambulatory care center is not a school or an educational institution. Every business hires interns. So is Goldman Sachs also a medical institution? Is it also a college? Methodist is doing nothing different than any other for-profit business by having interns at the site. Moreover, as you've heard neighbors say constantly, Methodist is consistently being unresponsive except for their pursuit of profit. They've not been responsive to the poor. Less than 1/3 of 1% of their revenue is spent on charity care. That's 33 cents out of every $100 that they take in. They've not been responsive, as you heard, to community concerns about traffic, not just about the projected building, but for years and years from the existing building. Nor have they been responsive to concerns about pollution. They weren't responsive to the community board's call for them to reduce the building. They didn't even listen to the BSA when you asked them for a detailed plan for securing the safety of children. So the only way they will listen is if you deny their variances and force them to create a building that fits into the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Baum, and I live in Park Slope, Brooklyn. I would like to talk to you about the letter sent to the BSA from Public School 39, an elementary school with 380 children and 2 blocks from Methodist. To my knowledge, the hospital has not spoken to many of the affected schools about its building plans, PS 39, MS 51, and Bean Sprouts, a nursery school with several Park Slope locations. Here are some excerpts of the letter written to the BSA by the PS 39 parent body, which was submitted for the record. Children in the area need you to help act as their voice to ensure their support and protection. The community would like the hospital to address the health and safety concerns of the children who attend school in the vicinity of the proposed construction. As parents, we are concerned about traffic congestion and safety, environmental pollution from the construction, demolition, diesel emissions, and from increased traffic. Please make sure due diligence is done so the community is protected. Signed from the 8 executive members of PS 39 Parent Association. Separately, on February 11, 2014, a Methodist senior vice president stated here that Methodist needs every inch of square feet for this project. Yet, last week, the hospital announced it would reduce the size of the project. Is it possible that this immaterial concession be timed to gain board approval and to distract us from major issues and shortcomings in the proposal? So let's take a step back. What is the big picture? What are 3 important points that we have to keep in mind? Methodist wants to build a health facility that is out of scale with the neighborhood and surrounding historic buildings that will, without a doubt, materially change the essential nature of the neighborhood. Methodist is requesting zoning variances for its proposed site when several years ago it was afforded special zoning treatment by being carved out of the historic district in which it resides. It is unprecedented to build a commercial tower in a landmark residential district. Have you heard of this being done before? Is it possible to safely build on narrow streets a tower with 2 schools adjacent to the proposed site? There are other outstanding questions, among them, how will the large number of additional vehicles be assimilated? What are the safest truck routes throughout the neighborhood? At the least, a traffic mitigation plan, student safeguards, and air quality data are needed. We hope Methodist will be forthcoming and adequately address all of the community's safety concerns. Ultimately, as we've recommended before, our strong recommendation is for Methodist to substantially scale back the size of the project.
Thank you. The next speaker.
My name is Philippa Garson. My family and I have lived on 5th Street adjacent to the John Jay for the past 4 years. I work from home and I'm attuned to the rhythms of the street. Barely an hour goes by when a double-parked car or truck is not snarling the traffic outside. Things have only got worse with the closure of several left turns off 4th Avenue, and our narrow street has become a thoroughfare for traffic moving east. It is bizarre to me that the hospital, which professes to be serving the people of Brooklyn, has done nothing to make the nearby subway station accessible to compromised patients. Furthermore, we have a proposed truck depot across the street from us, which will see upwards of 30 trucks a day entering, idling, and continuing up 5th Street. I do not believe the environmental impact of these trucks on 2,000 children schooling mere meters away has been considered. It's bad enough trying to walk along 7th Avenue with trucks reversing from the existing depot, but at least this is a wide avenue, a main traffic route that, unlike 5th Street, is not adjacent to schools. Studies show that the diesel fuel that powers trucks can spew 100 to 200 times more soot into the air than gasoline engines, and the exhaust is so toxic that the World Health Organization classifies it as a carcinogen. Countrywide, there's increasing awareness of the toxic effects of traffic pollution on children, and many states have outlawed the building of new schools nearer than 500 feet from busy roads. Studies in Rhode Island, Cincinnati, San Francisco, and New York all point to the toxic effects of traffic pollution and links to the rising incidence of childhood asthma. A 2006 study in Rhode Island, not in my schoolyard, recommended that schools be set back 2,500 feet where diesel, gasoline, oxygen, and other combustible or poisonous gases are transported. Already, Park Slope has higher asthma rates than would be expected. Many believe this is a result of the emissions from the hospital. My youngest child, who has a chronic health condition, and I both suffer from asthma. I dread to think of the toll this new construction will take on her health. But what is of greater concern is the health of the 2,000 other children whose school just a stone's throw from the proposed construction. What plans does the hospital have to curtail the environmental pollution from demolition, construction, diesel emissions, and increased traffic? Another major concern is safety. Last year, there was a tragic incident on Prospect Park West, the death of Sammy Eckstein, who was run over by a truck, that has heightened the fears of parents in Park Slope. Our children walk everywhere, to and from the more than 10 schools and preschools in the close vicinity. What kind of safety plan does the hospital envisage to protect our children from trucks reversing and idling on 5th Street, or the many more cars and traffic congestion the development will bring? So far, I think what we've heard today is the hospital is paying lip service to our concerns about traffic and safety. I ask the BSA to think very carefully before granting the hospital the variances it requires to build an aggressive development in the heart of Park Slope community. There are reasons why
Your
these
time is
zoning
up.
laws are in place, and they are good reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I had wanted to, these are all pictures. Sorry, quite enough for them. Hello, my name is Andrea Knutson. I've lived on 6th Street for 14 years now, in Park Slope longer than that. I am worried about all of the things, including lots of accessoride things which weren't mentioned or so, but mainly I am worried that this building, this massive building, will be ugly. Now, the iconic buildings of Park Slope are 4-story brownstones, limestones, and small apartment buildings. Methodist says, no, it can't do this. It can't make it, wouldn't work with that. So I started looking around Park Slope, what buildings are bigger than that but fit in. 8th Avenue does have a number of quite lovely 6-story apartment buildings, some of them, definitely good size. And trying to see, what is it about these buildings that make them fit in with the brownstone, with their brownstone neighbors. And my handout has pretty pictures of them. What makes them fit in, I say, is the variety they offer. There is variety in their windows, variety in their brickwork, variety in their roof lines. That strikes me as one of the really, really important things, is the roof lines. Their doorways are large, ornamented. They're either recessed in some, great mysterious, you go into it, or they're extended from the facade. Most of these have fairly romantic ornamentation, but, if you do not, I like castles and knights, but if you are not into castles, knights, and squiggles, there are examples in there, 148th Street, where their beautiful things are done with a strictly abstract right angles, but there is, again, variety in the windows, variety in the roof line. In contrast, we look at the hospital buildings, and we look at the medical pavilion, or the Rite Aid building, as it is unaffectionately known. We see a flat roof line, a flat facade. Every brick looks like every other brick. This is on the last page, Hannah. The doorway can hardly be even seen from across the street. Now, they have matched the colors with John Jay High School, a magnificent building with a magnificent doorway, and they are only 5 stories, so I would put them in the not horrible class, but Methodist is proud of this building. They think it's beautiful, and the thought that, it said it's not horrible, but the thought that they might build something like as dull as this, almost double the height, really gives me nightmares. There are some taller buildings along 8th Avenue, but none of them have none of them go block to block, except for Final One, and I would love them to copy it. If they cloned the Armory, which is a big building and goes from all across, that would be wonderful.
Thank you. The next speaker.
Chair Srinivasan and Commissioners, my name is Andrea Stewart. I live half a block east of where the hospital plans to build the Center for Community Health. I moved there in 2000, choosing Park Slope because it had the same neighborhood feel I had in the West Village from which I was moving. It had a street life where neighbors sit out on their stoops and say hello to each other. It had low-rise buildings that lent to the neighborhood feel and narrow tree-lined streets. When I moved here in 2000, I had no idea what exactly the history of the neighborhood was. I chose it only because it had that character. My building, I found out later, was built in the 1920s, not quite as old as I had thought, given its rattling windows and old pipes. Little did I suspect that the brownstones on the corner of my block, on the corner of 8th Avenue and 5th Street, were the earliest buildings in the immediate vicinity. They date almost to the same time as the hospital itself, 116 years old. I've brought a map here from 1898 that shows the grid of Park Slope, and you can see that it's tiny. You can see that the buildings are in pink. All the other area is unbuilt. You can also see that there's a lot of blank area. Here is the hospital, and it's in a traditional institutional shape, taking up block 1084. 1086, sorry. And here, one block away, is a lot of nothing. Except for the 5 brownstones right here.
Excuse me, you want to take them?
I'm headed right back, but 5 brownstones on the corner that the hospital plans to destroy. Imagine what must have been like to be the first building in a newly developed neighborhood. Well, why imagine? Because here in this photo, taken from 1900, is 8th Avenue, facing 4th Street in the foreground, and just beyond that is 5th Street, where you can see those historic brownstones right there that Methodist plans to destroy. I know that the hospital owns these buildings, and they have the right to destroy them, due to some negotiations they made to exclude themselves from the landmark district. However, the hospital in those negotiations did promise to maintain the essential character of the neighborhood should they build in their exempted zone. In fact, the hospital has been promising this for decades, that they would endeavor to preserve the character of the neighborhood. In 1966, Methodist was part of a coalition to designate Park Slope as a neighborhood conservation district and worked to preserve the neighborhood's integrity and pressed officials such as yourselves to enforce the building codes. What has changed since then, I ask? In 2009, they promised to the Park Slope Civic Council that any building should blend in contextually with surrounding adjacent and nearby historic properties to the extent practicable, and that architectural design of any construction or development of the property shall make every effort to preserve and to add to the sense of place.
I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you. The next speaker.
Any more? Oh, sorry.
Any more speakers? Yes, please come forward.
My name is Ed Stickrad. I've been a resident of Park Slope for 24 years. I live on 7th Street. And Madam Chairman, at the last meeting that we were at, I know you'd suggested or requested that the hospital present wider views of, instead of just their building, a streetscape view. I didn't see any of that here today. And I think that would have really been helpful to see their building in that wider context that you would ask for. And also, the other comments that I heard today was that in responding to some of those earlier requests, they submitted the very same material, which was very well stated. So, I don't think you're getting what you're asking for. Another element that bothers me is that when we speak of height of buildings, stories, when we're speaking of the brownstones, there's about maybe 10 feet per floor. When they use the same term, it's going to be dropped down to 4 stories on the street level, well, 4 stories to them is 15 feet per floor or higher. So, that's not matching bananas to bananas. So, along with that, and it was made reference to how the construction is going to take place, and you see the one block again of 6th Street. But those trucks come from somewhere, and they come from Prospect Park West, and they'll come down 6th Street. All of the traffic now on Prospect Park West, I would say you could count 75% of it in the morning, because I walk the dog frequently and cross the corner of 6th Street. The traffic turns and comes down 6th Street going to the hospital. That's a regular route for traffic to the hospital now. Add on to that this additional construction and ongoing traffic is going to be just impossible. As has been mentioned, all the other streets are so narrow as well. And we've, as neighbors, have an ongoing almost battle with the hospital about the 7th Avenue and 7th Street corner, where the trucks come to deliver, the ambulances keep coming, blocking the corners, the ambulance park anywhere along 7th Avenue or the side streets that they want. There's no designated area for them other than on, I think, 6th Street, which they never use. So they park illegally everywhere else. So that problem is not going away. It's only getting worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, actually, the applicant did in their submission, I think it was probably, believe March 14th submission, they did provide additional information on streetscapes and views in the surrounding area, so it's in the record.
Good afternoon, Hiram Rothberg. I was originally given a copy of Phil Habib's traffic study, which in the first paragraph specifically said that it wasn't done in accordance with the secret manual. I didn't know the context of that, and of course I wrote a letter and had about 30 or 40 bullet points of, after reviewing the document, of inaccuracies and other items that were eloquently pointed out by a lot of the members here at the board, not understanding the context of the screens and the future no action with action scenarios. However, in accordance with the secret manual, any construction over 3 years requires a construction analysis to be prepared in accordance with SECRA, and the construction analysis gets involved into traffic, parking, pedestrian, safety, air quality, and noise, which the analysis that we reviewed didn't include.
Okay, so some of the comments that you gave in your papers to us was because you didn't understand the context of this.
We didn't understand the no action scenario.
I see, but your recent comment is because they have a construction period which is greater than 3 years.
Greater than 3 years, in accordance with the manual. Any construction over 2 years, I'm sorry, not 3 years, over 2 years requires a construction analysis, which includes a lot of those categories that are being discussed here today.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers on this item? Any more speakers? Or is Ms. Wagner?
Please restate your name for the record.
Elise Wagner, and we'd like to ask Michael Kortler and then Frank Gunther to respond to the presentation by Preserve Park Slope.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Michael Kortler. I'm the principal of Michael Kortler and Associates in New York City. I appear at the request of New York Methodist Hospital. I've reviewed the garage build alternative proposed by Preserve Park Slope and to assess the extent of the zoning waivers that it would require. The materials included with the proposal do not provide specific floor area numbers or floor-to-floor heights, at least not that I could see. With respect to the latter, I've assumed floor-to-floor heights of 20 feet at the ground floor and 14 feet at the floors above, really based on their assumption of the engineer's report about the garage and the overbuild, that they had assumed 14 feet. So first, the Preserve Park Slope proposal requires nearly all of the same waivers as the hospital's proposal, and a whole series of new ones which are unique to the Preserve Park Slope alternative, what they call the overbuild. The waivers include, and this is for both the Methodist and PPS, the waivers include lot coverage, rear yard equivalents, and distribution of floor area. With respect to height, Both the alternative proposal and the hospital's modified proposal fully comply with the height and setback regulations in the R7B district. The R6B portion of the alternative proposal does not comply with the applicable maximum base height and maximum building height. But I should note that there is a non-compliance with this is in the R6B, that there is two additional non-compliances with the maximum building height and the maximum base height in the R6B district in the Preserve Park Slope submission. But we have included them here, which is what you can see right there. Second, although the alternative proposal has a lower building height than the hospital's proposal within the R6B, its upper floors are closer to the 5th Street line than is proposed by the hospital. Interestingly, most of the bulk reduction in the proposed alternative ends up on 6th Street, which is really internal to the hospital, where the impact of that height is not really particularly significant, given the height and scale of the existing hospital buildings, which bear no resemblance whatsoever to a row house. The Preserve Park Slope alternative also requires 3 additional waivers for the western through lot within which the existing garage is located, and these are not minor. The most important one is the reduction of a rear yard equivalent from 60 feet to 45 feet. Having worked on some of the other variances for ambulatory care facilities which have appeared before the board, this is a very significant change because the rear yard is also part of the state's multiple dwelling law, and there are actual residences, people living in Wesley Hall, who will be affected by a substandard distance between buildings. The second is that the lot coverage of the portion of the zoning lots exceeds the maximum of 65%, in fact, by quite a lot. And then third, the building does not provide the required minimum distance between buildings on floors containing dwelling units. So, notwithstanding what has been said, actually, the PPS proposal requires more variances than the New York Methodist one, although to be fair, some of the degrees of the variance are a little bit less in the PPS proposal because the heights are a little bit lower. But nonetheless, whatever you say about this it's filling in a rear yard, so whether it's a little lower or a little bit higher is a matter of degree of the variance, but the fundamental variance is no rear yard equivalent at that location in order to connect pieces of the hospital. That's it.
Any questions for Mr. Quartler? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Frank Gunther. I'm a principal of Perkins Eastman, the architects being quoted earlier today. And my purpose now is to provide some response to what we had seen previously with regard to the Preserve Park Slope alternatives to the project. I'm going to limit my comments to just a few in view of the time and the magnitude of the issues before us. These are the subjects I'm going to talk about. First of all, we have looked at their plans carefully, and we've looked at them in terms of the key points to see how it might work with the building. And my contention is, through all of these, is that the new building does have problems and creates some greater difficulties for providing the building that would meet the programmatic needs. In circulation, the extensive addition at the west end over the garage produces a very long building, which is difficult for patients to maneuver, especially patients who are weak and frail, such as those coming for cancer, or those coming for cancer infusion, or those coming for surgery. And the distance shown here from the elevator core, which is, as we had proposed initially, at the east side of the site, and the far reaches in the far west end are certainly excessive and greater than should be the case. Our attempt in our design was to put the core to the center of the building, access via a controlled entrance point at the ground level, and then minimize the travel distance that anybody would travel throughout the building. So this is a problem. The second issue I'd like to look at is circulation. Good planning practice separates the movement of patients who have frailties and their caregivers from the back of house support programs that go on within the building. Our plans provide 2 circulation paths, one at the south side of the building, facing 6th Street, that is reached by coming off the elevators, going to receiving and waiting areas, and circulating east and west across the building to the different components. This plan produces a crossing of the back-of-house traffic, the materials delivery, the garbage, the red bag disposal, things like that, with patients who would be crossing into sensitive patient care areas. And we think that would be a problem, as illustrated by this overlay. By the way, these are overlays that we have made to the drawings provided by Park Slope. Okay. Structural conflicts. This is the first of 2 slides on this subject, and I would like to begin by pointing out that the area shaded with the red dots on the left side is an area that is impossible to build the scheme that they're proposing. This portion of their plan is in conflict with the entrance to the garage. To build it, you have to take away the entrance to the garage and would not return unless you put something else in that location. The red square to the right of that represents a general suggestion by them, either there or in the vertical gray bar, of a second elevator core that would function for the building. It is very important for the safety of patients and the confidentiality of information that goes on that the access to the building be controlled, that there not be 2 separate entrances to these buildings. And our concept with the core on the east side is compromised by another core on the left side. And we're talking about people who are arriving in the building, staff and patients. But we're also talking about delivery of materials. And the suggestion by the Preserve Park Slope Group is that the loading dock and the receiving areas, as you see in the tan on the left side of this drawing, would be such that you have to traverse to the right through a core which is in tight conflict with the garage and the circulation space to the building. So we have a vertical circulation in conflict with a horizontal movement at the grade level, which is a very important point. This drawing also represents truly, accurately, our drop-off area. And our drop-off, our concept, our design has drop-off on the site, away from the street. So people come in, are picked up, dropped off, go to parking and return from parking to pick up people who are leaving, are within that central driveway, within the middle of the building. We originally had intended that to exit to 5th Street, and we, in response to the community, we made U-turn possible in that. By putting this core into this left side of this circulation area, we constrict and frustrate the ability to get into the garage beneath and to let that happen. And we certainly would not want traffic to go back out onto 5th Street. And the circulation between the components of the building would not be possible under this scheme. The next slide follows that description of structure. Yes, it is possible to build 5 floors above the parking structure. However, as one of the gentlemen said earlier, there are vibration isolation requirements for a surgical floor, which is on the 3rd level of this proposed building. And you would need to put substantial structure to do that. Secondly, the module of spacing that relates to that 95-foot dimension referred to in the width of the unit, and the spacing of surgical procedure rooms, operating rooms, if you will, and support spaces for that, is a different spacing pattern than the garage, which is below. The addition of a building over the garage, also by virtue of its size and its separation from the rest of the building, would necessitate additional mechanical equipment at the top of that building. We've shown here what we believe would be a boiler plant that would be necessary up there with necessary stacks and so forth, with discharges at a lower elevation than would be in the design that we had proposed to begin with. Working our way down to the bottom of the building, there would need to be a transition from the structure of the building above the garage to the garage. The reconfiguration of columns necessitated by the programs above in conflict with the spacing of the garage columns below would require this transfer, and in our estimation would require a reinforcing of the foundations because of these point loads and the increased load put onto the building. It's not simply a generic 5-level addition, it's a specific addition to serve certain programs. Okay, next. The programming and the planning of the building is at the heart of the reason for this building and the reason for our design. And Perkins Eastman has many, many years' experience in medical planning and design of many projects, some of whom were referenced by other speakers here this morning. The development of a workable surgical suite, and this is ambulatory care surgery, is predicated on several facts. Number one, that the patient who arrives should be received and protected, brought into that cocoon of care that allows them to be treated properly within the building. The alternate, shown here, prepared by Preserve Park Slope, removes a waiting room for surgery. There's no place to receive the people. It assumes they would merely go to a waiting area that's further to the east, which is serving the medical care practices. That doesn't work. It also is reduced in area and small, so small that you cannot fit in a pre-op area within the building. It would require a circulation, rather than the black circulation I'm showing here, a circulation illustrated in blue that frustrates the movement and care of delivery and compromises sanitary protection necessary in a surgical care suite. The planning and design of a surgical suite, as correctly indicated by the Preserve Park Slope people, would have the prep, recovery, and surgical functions on one floor. It would also have direct access to central sterile supply, which brings the instruments to the rooms and allows doctors to come in street clothes and regown and change before they go into the procedures. The combination of those three elements on one floor is not possible within the confines of either our plan or the Preserve Park Slope alternate. Our plan provided a solution to this that put recovery on one floor, surgery on the floor below it, and then the prep areas, including central sterile and staff locker rooms, with designated elevator connections that served only those three functions and only those floors. This is a worst case. This does not allow for the proper care delivery by virtue of its shape, by virtue of its distance, and by virtue of the inability to provide all the functions that would work with a surgical suite. Next slide. Lastly, with regard to the traffic and circulation space, when we studied a complying alternate to the scheme, we also looked at building over the garage. And we felt that you could not fit the delicate care delivery functions of surgery into that space. And we had a different function that was narrower, trying to avoid the complications with the garage. We contend that whatever is built over the garage would require a designated entrance from 5th Street because of the need for people to traverse vertically within the building and to get to upper floors without having to go through a Byzantine path that circuits throughout the entire building that is exhausting and difficult for patients, especially those who are weak in need of the care being provided here. So because of that, we contend that 5th Street would be hurt for several reasons if this scheme was built, and this would be worse to the community than our concept. Number one, there would be patient drop-off on 5th Street. Number two, people who are being dropped off, the people who are still in the car, would have to circle around to try to get the parking, or else go into the garage from 5th Street, which is, again, creating a traffic issue with 5th Street. The loading dock is another issue presented as a problem in the scheme proposed by Park Slope. We had the loading dock pushed as far back to the south on our side as possible for the express reason to allow trucks to come in head first, exit head first, and maneuver into a loading position on our property, just as we're having patients dropped off within our property, trying to help the community. This concept pushes the loading dock to 5th Street, would necessitate trucks maneuvering in 5th Street, right across the street from the school. We don't think that's a good idea, and we contend that that's difficult. If one would argue that, no, that's not true, you can still skate by behind it, well, the materials handling and support space would be further diminished by taking out the lower left portion of that wing to accommodate the headroom necessary to get into the garage in the first place. It just would not be workable. So in summary, we're suggesting that good planning principles went into the design. A lot of attention was put to developing the scheme, and we contend that the Park Slope, while maybe well-intentioned, is really a detriment, not a help to the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes, Commissioner.
I guess one of the obvious things that I thought could be used above the garage is the parking that's currently in the parking levels in the care center. And it just seems to me that you have a structure that has a foundation. It's a big open space there on the site. And I just wanted to know what you thought about the feasibility of adding
Vertically
yes,
to that garage?
and then using that cellar space either for program needs or for relocated mechanicals or just levels that did not have to be constructed.
The current garage has 3 levels below grade. You access from the driveway just in this location, between the Medical Arts Building and the proposed the existing garage. You go down and you spiral down today into the lower levels of that garage. The top roof deck of the garage today, which has, I don't know, 50 or so parking spaces, is accessed from Fifth Street at the eastern end of that rectangle and is not connected in any way with the garage below. If you want to put parking there, you would have to create a separate entrance and circulation, which would only be accessed from Fifth Street. You couldn't get to it from the current driveway or Fifth Street. We thought, what we learned from the community, notably the people on Fifth Street, that we would do anything we could to protect Fifth Street from the intrusion. Part of why we put the bulk of the building on Sixth Street rather than on Fifth Street. And so putting parking there, we think, would add to the traffic on Fifth Street and not allow for continuity within the garage below.
So what you're saying is the layout, the internal layout that you have for the drop-off will have access to the lower levels.
Yes.
But it doesn't have access to the ground floor level. And that ground floor level is only accessed from Fifth Street, and you couldn't.
The topmost level of that garage, which the ground level, which is at grade at the east end, it's a little higher than grade because the grade slopes down as you go toward 7th Avenue. We're proposing to keep some parking on the west end of it, but on the east end, we're proposing to put the receiving dock. So we would keep some parking there, a small amount, but we think that the basic parking, our concept, puts two levels of parking below our new building and connects to the existing garage underneath. So you can get to the garage when our project will be finished in one of two ways. You could come in the existing driveway between the Medical Arts Building and Wesley House and go down and spiral within the garage, or you could come into our entrance and connect in, and you could go out either entrance, in either entrance. Adding on top would create a complete separation, and it's a small footprint compared to the garage below.
So it wouldn't be possible to add a ramp up to upper floors of parking, is what you're saying?
If you put a ramp in, you would not have a loading dock on the property. If you put parking there and not the loading dock, you'd have to put loading dock some other place, and we think that could be a problem. You'd wind up with trucks perhaps loading on Fifth Street or Sixth Street, which would just aggravate the situation. So we think a parking solution, when balanced against the movement of traffic and vehicles entering and leaving, is not helping the situation that the community people have espoused here today.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our response.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Wagner? I think just a few things. Some of this additional information, we're welcome to review, including some of the responses to what Preserve Park Slope gave us, if you could put that in the record. I think particularly related to the program and actually all the 5 points that was made in the last presentation regarding the feasibility of this alternative and its pros and cons. I think what would be helpful to us and the board is really to identify the mitigation may not be the right word, but the measures that are going to be put in place to address traffic loading as well as construction. So on the issue of, it's really an issue on Fifth Street of loading, and I know that they talked about trucks. Is there a way that one can ensure that the loading peaks are not at the same time as the peak of the school and where you have the heaviest traffic along Fifth Street? I think there's a way to address that, which is, it's really about the operation of the hospital and when they could sort of determine when the loading can take place. I think in terms of the construction impacts along Sixth Street, if there's a real plan to put all the staging essentially inside the site for most part, including trucks to come in and come out during demolition and removal of material, then I think that should be outlined as well, and the board will take that into consideration in terms of incorporating it into any support.
Yes. And I should have said, as I think I said earlier, that we will submit revised plans reflecting the changes to the building, which were described in our letter last week, and we will describe in writing the in more detail Mr. Gunther's presentation regarding what we see as the infirmities of the Park Slope proposal. We will submit a letter describing that. And I believe we're also going to submit a letter in response to some of the comments on traffic and environmental issues.
Right, I know that were raised today as well. Okay, yes.
Regarding the construction period, do you have to meet with the DOT regarding truck routes and have that planned out in advance?
I believe that to be the case, but I would prefer that, did Chuck have to leave? Okay. Yeah, I mean, right, but I believe as part of planning for any construction, there are extensive meetings regarding not only the construction staging, but also how traffic will move throughout the neighborhood.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant? All right, Mr. Klein, do you want to say anything into the record? Yes, please come forward.
Yes, please restate your name for the record.
Yes, Stuart Klein. I just want to address 3 quick items. Number 1, as you know, the building code requires that foundations be able to support, or you have to show that they support 150% of their safety factor of 150% or 50% rather on all foundations. I assume that this garage was built, and everybody, I believe in their mind understands that the garage was built for future development, and I think that's why New York Methodist is trying so desperately not to shift any of this bulk over to on top of the garage. In fact, I don't believe the question was answered with regard to any other ancillary facilities that could be possibly put over the garage. That was not addressed in the response by Perkins. Number 1. Number 2, I know of no section of the multiple dwelling law that requires more than a 35-foot rear yard. Certainly a 45-foot rear yard is more than enough. There was an error in that. And I also will have to reconcile some of the testimony from Perkins Easton with the plans that it submitted for 1133 York, because that seems to violate some of the industry standards they spoke about, or at least presented to you today. And the final issue is that this whole idea of programmatic needs seems to have been put on the side. They're constantly referring to it and using it and mentioning it in some type of incantatorial fashion. It becomes a mantra, and it becomes an assumption that it in fact exists. It doesn't exist. They haven't proven that it exists. And as a matter of fact, I've submitted a number of times and testified here a number of times that this is palpably deficient in the programmatic needs aspect of the A finding. And I know for a fact that they have done studies. They have done studies in preparation of the certificate of needs that has to be presented to the Department of Health in order to secure the certificate of needs, and I ask that the board demand that those studies be submitted to it. If the board is not going to demand that those studies be submitted to it, I have no other recourse than to subpoena them and issue a subpoena ducis tecum to New York Methodist Hospital, and hopefully through the subpoena, I'll be able to present them myself. Why they're being hidden from you is beyond me. I suspect they're being hidden from you for a particular reason, and that reason is they cannot support the programmatic needs argument. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Would you like to respond to?
We have no further response.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions for the applicant? All right. So this is what I suggest. I think we should, there are 2 issues here. One has to do with the variance itself. One is the amendment, and just leaving the amendments aside, just on the variance case, which is 289-13BZ, I think we should close the hearing. I think we'll set a schedule so that that you can submit your papers to us, Mr. Klein, and Preserve Park Slope has the opportunity to review that and submit their comments, and then we can, you can have the last set of papers to be submitted. On the amendment case, what we will do is we will continue the hearing. That'll give Mr. Klein the opportunity to review that, since he had said he hadn't. It'll also allow the board and the applicant to make sure that they meet all the notification requirements. So we would be fulfilling all the board's rules as well. So why don't we first set the schedule for the variance? Would you be able to submit in a week?
I think we would like 2 weeks so we make sure that the redesign of the building is really meets the hospital's programmatic needs. So if we could have 2 weeks, I think it's the 22nd.
That seems fine.
We will submit everything by then.
Okay, April 22nd.
Mhm.
Mr. Klein will give you till May 6th.
Madam Chair, it appears that the board is unwilling to ask for the studies that were prepared by New York Methodist in order to support its programmatic needs. And it appears that you also don't want to address the issue of whether or not this comes within the penumbra of the Cornell decision and the Sarah Lawrence decision. So I will, at the instruction of my client, be issuing a subpoena for these items under the CPLR, the relevant section of CPLR. It will be approximately 2 weeks before I have that in hand to submit to the board. I would therefore ask for additional time.
Okay, we're going to give you up till May 6th for your submission. And
That's predicated on the fact, of course, that they in fact conform to the subpoena. If they don't, I will be addressing a letter asking for additional time.
all right, the schedule right now is May 6th. And Ms. Wagner, you can respond back on May 13th, and we can set the decision date for May 20th. Let me just make sure I have that calendar in with me.
292BC.
Okay, for 14292BZ, we will continue the hearing on April 29th. Mr. Klein, if you have any comments on that and you'd like to submit them beforehand, you can submit them on April.
I'm sorry, I was speaking.
Okay, April 29th is the continued hearing for the amendment. If you have anything to submit into the record.
Chance to look at it.
Okay, well, I'll give you a date.
What-
Okay,
what's
so
it-
it's
what's it-
April 22nd. If you have anything to submit.
Notifications made, because my clients didn't know about it.
Right, I understand that.
Yes. So well, I'll have to check.
As long as if the board and the applicant meets the notification requirements in the amount of time, then it would meet the rules. So April 29th. You are in a position to tell your clients that it's going to be on April 29th. And so they'll go through the process of proper notification, but I think everybody's here, or a good portion of people are here, who are being told that the hearing's going to be on April 29th. Right? So that's for the amendment. Any other issues or questions? Yes. Okay. All right, and we're going to close the hearing for 289-13BZ.
Motion to close. Chair Srinivasan?
Aye.
Commissioner Hinkson?
Aye.
Commissioner Montanez?
Aye.
Commissioner Otley Brown?
Thank you very much.
This concludes the public hearing.
Oh. Still on?